Okay. Think we're good to go. Double check everything. Let me know if you guys can hear me. Hopefully we are good to go. All right. Welcome everyone. A few people in chat already, which is very, very cool. First time that's happened over the last few streams. So that's really exciting, really cool. Evidence that the community is growing and people are getting more and more excited. So look, there's a lot to cover today. Most of the time will be spent actually coding and sort of going through the design of the mission system and developing things. First time doing a live coding stream, so there's bound to be a few challenges. Maybe I need to fix some things as we go. And hopefully I don't lose my internet because weather here isn't the best and sometimes we lose internet here. So fingers crossed, it all works out pretty well. And we have no issues. So first thing I'm gonna do is sort of go through topics for today as a summary, sort of a highlight, and then we'll get into some development. You guys feel free to ask questions whenever. Happy to answer them. I've got chat and everything set up properly, and hopefully you'll see the comments and stuff coming through on the stream, which I think is super exciting. Very, very cool. I'm also feeling a bit sick. I've been a bit off all week, so we'll see how my throat holds out because it's I've had a very sore throat this week, so and it's already a little bit raspy. So we'll see how we go. If it gets really bad, then we'll probably have to cut the stream a bit short. But the stream's going to go for probably a few hours at least. I've got 3 hours scheduled of my own time from the family, so we've got at least 3 hours, or at least up to 3 hours. So we'll see how we go. I don't usually talk while I'm coding. Everything's in my head. So if I go really quiet, just kind of poke me and remind me to talk about what I'm thinking through, and then I'll sort of bring that forward. So first and foremost, let's go through topics for today and a few other things. I've got some really exciting news to share, and then we'll get into some coding. And then towards the end, I'll give you guys some broader updates regarding, it's peaking. Okay, cool. I can fix it up. How's that? Just turn it down a little bit. And towards the end, we'll do some, I'll give you guys some updates, current challenges, and like I said, some really exciting stuff to share with you all. So let's get started. All right. Let's start with the presentation and go through that. And that's not in demo, so let's go. No, it's gone full screen again. Bastard. 1 second. Not full screen. There we go. Okay, is Mike good now? We good or? Okay, great. Thank you all. Right, let's get started on topics for today. So first things first, we've got a new website coming. So this is not the game UI that you guys have seen a lot of, but the current sort of front website, the marketing website. There's a few reasons for this. The first is that to prepare for launch, I basically want all of the content and the website itself tied into user accounts with the game, which means that it makes it easier for you to kind of comment and engage on the website itself. It also means that we can do some really cool stuff like setting up forums and all sorts of things, which we'll see how we go with that. I don't know how useful forums are these days due to Discord, but we'll see. Maybe sort of embed Discord on the website or something. That's coming with a really cool new design. Some really interesting stuff there. So that's not a priority at the moment, but just letting you guys know that it is coming and will be launched later this year. Next, we've got a new team member, which I think is news to everybody except maybe Jun. I think Jun's with us as well today, which is fantastic. If you're not aware, Jun, JWTC, is one of the developers on the team, helping out a lot there. We have a new team member, and the team member is not a developer. His name is Jan Bjorkman. I hope I've said that correctly. Jan is an author and a writer, actually. And Jan reached out to me a few months ago now, I think about November last year. Basically just sent me some just some ideas for content, and wrote like a summary of kind of like where we are in the current timeline of Halcyon Online. And his writing is absolutely amazing. Like it's just at such a high level. He's clearly very enthused and excited about the game. So we had some discussions and just last week sort of signed off on an agreement to kind of get him on board. So Jan will be responsible for developing the storyline leading up to launch, as well as the in-game missions and the narrative that you'll find there. And Jan and I are very much on the same page with everything. It's like, he's brought forward a lot of ideas, and they're the exact same ideas that I had without disclosing as much, which is super exciting. It means we're off to a good start right away, and there's a little teaser about that coming shortly as well. Next, we're going to talk about sort of the mission system and the goals around that, and sort of what I want to achieve with that. This is one of those features that it's easy to kind of go really far with it, but considering it requires a lot of content and a lot of time to develop a really in-depth mission system, we're going to kind of play it by ear. So what I mean by that is we'll sort of start with a fairly basic mission system to begin with, and then as time goes on, we'll implement more and more stuff. But there's quite a few objectives I have for the mission system that I do want at launch, to make essentially or sort of draw together the missions, the lore, and the game mechanics and features, and sort of bring them all together as part of one narrative, which I think is going to be really cool and really exciting. You don't see it very much in games, and definitely not in this sort of game. I don't know of a single browser-based MMORTS that has any sort of lore, except maybe some very light fluff. And if you guys have read sort of the lore and the stories on the website already, that will be expanded leading up to launch and into the game as well. Let's have a quick talk about, about current challenges a little bit later on. Sorry, excuse me. And then, yeah, we'll talk about current challenges. So a lot of things have kind of held me up personally, developing the current systems and sort of where we're headed to. Then we'll do some live development. Like I said, the goal for today is to work on the mission system from design to implementation. We'll see how far we get with that. I suspect we'll probably be able to make quite a bit of progress, but we'll see. Time will always tell. We'll talk about the next test phase, sort of what we can expect of that. I was really hoping to be there at this point, but we're just not there yet. There's still quite a few things to do, and actually part of that is actually the mission system, a very light mission system sort of baked in place there. And the reason why that's important is because things like colonization of celestial bodies actually requires the mission system to function. We just haven't gotten to that point yet. So, when I was talking about delivery of the next test phase with spacecraft production and colonization stuff, I really underestimated just the scope of just that. It sounds like one piece, but there's actually several systems working together kind of to get to that point. So as opposed to infrastructure management and research, which are really very much their own systems, colonization of a celestial body, which is really what I want available for the next test phase, requires spacecraft production, fleet management, the mission system, observation of systems, all these sorts of things. And we've made a lot of headway there. We're probably about 80% of the way through, with sort of a basic mission system laid over the top to kind of get it all glued together. But yeah, we still need to develop that as well. DGAA, please upload the stream. Yeah, look, this is recorded on YouTube, so it'll be recorded automatically and available. And I'll also be sort of pulling out, I guess, sort of the big features from the dev stream and sort of pulling up as part of short videos or shorts as well. And then finally, we'll do a bit of a demo. So the state of the game at the moment, you guys are going to see a lot anyway, just because I'm sort of working on stuff that is in progress, and the mission system is based off that in progress work. So you're going to see a lot anyway, which is pretty exciting. So that's it. So quick teaser, like I said. So Jan Bjorkman has joined the team. He's going to be working on the in-game lore, as well as sort of stories and that sort of thing. A separate piece, however, that's not included as part of his contributions to the game is an idea he had to basically write these short novels called the Halcyon Chronicles. He's already written quite a bit, and these will be made available sort of in the future, probably post-launch. And I don't know if the Custodial War is going to be something that we start with, but he's very interested in sort of developing novels for the game, and they will be purchasable separate from the game. So that's Jan's own project. Essentially, it's just sort of licensing Halcyon to kind of develop those novels. But I can tell you straight away, I've read most of the stuff they sent me already, and it is really, really well written. And it's this kind of stuff that I just love to read as well. So I'm very excited to have the Halcyon Chronicles available in the future, which Jen will be providing. All right, so that's it for the plugs for the time being. Let's get to where we go to. I guess we'll go to the game for now and see how we go. So, okay, so let me just double check OBS, see where we're at the moment. Yeah, okay, can you guys see the game? Can you guys see my cursor on the screen when I'm in the game? Moving around? If not, I just need to make some changes to OBS. Hopefully chat hasn't frozen on me. I'm having problems there. Let me just double check the settings here just to double check. Can't see the cursor. Damn, okay. Why is it not showing the cursor? Is that? Oh, you know what it is? I think, let me just fiddle with OBS here for a second. Let me go back to the splash screen. Oh, that changes it back. Okay, all right, you're gonna see me do a little bit of debugging quickly. I think what I need to do is set up a new source. We'll put that at the back. Let's call this game capture. Let's not make the source visible just yet. Okay, cool. Yeah, that's what it is. So I needed to use a different source. So that's that. We're going to use window capture, and we're going to capture the game. I'm going to fix up a second. There's a reason why I want to show the cursor as well, which is actually important-ish. Sorry, excuse me. Yeah, I can already feel my throat having some problems, so we'll see how we go. Okay, we're going to crop this. Let me check the settings for this one first. This one is cancel. What's the filters for this? Oh, now I can just paste the filters. That'd be good. See how that goes. Oh, that worked nicely, I think. Okay, let's see if we can get that going now. I'll turn this one on and I'll put that in front of there. Oh, that didn't work. Try that again. That's way too big. Sorry, all. Yeah, this is a ginormous window. Okay. I think that should do it. Let's see how we go. I think that'll work. Let's try that. Turn off the window capture, put the game capture up here. Okay, let's see. All right, can you guys see the cursor now? The reason why I ask also is because I noticed in previous streams that I'll be clicking buttons and stuff and nobody could really see what I was doing. You see sort of the hover effects and things, but nothing else. If we can get going here. Yeah, okay, cool. All right, cool. Thanks, Lollipop, Mr. Lollipop. Can you see the custom cursor, or is it showing you the default? Hopefully it's showing the custom, but you never know. Showing custom, fantastic. Okay, cool. Right, so that was one of the pieces. So it seems like such a minor thing, and maybe it probably is. But I think one of the important things about having a well-designed game is having literally every element sort of reflect sort of the game's atmosphere, the design direction, all that sort of thing. So this is just the first cursor. There's a bunch of cursors coming. These are completely custom made, so I've had to learn how to create vector art and do that stuff. But I'll just have an idea in regards to what I want to do, right? So that's all working now. And there'll be lots of cursor things like adding stuff, editing stuff, deleting things, so it's super clear. And hopefully we can kind of get some cool loading cursors and stuff going as well. But we'll see. We'll see what happens. All right, let's just do a showcase of a couple of things here, and then we'll move on to the development stuff. So first things first is the research screen. The research screen has had, actually, in fact, there's been a bunch of sort of design updates to the UI and the UX. The research screen has had the biggest update. And the reason for that is because I'm not sure if you remember where it was before in previous streams, but it was kind of like this, little screen over on the side here next to the planet. You kind of scroll down to view the research. The way it works now is just, it's much cleaner, it uses up a lot more screen real estate. It also makes it easier to scale this down for mobile. So mobile won't be in portrait mode, it'll be landscape, right? So it'll be in this sort of ratio, 16:9 sort of. And it just makes it easy to kind of scale that down and work with that. So it's a good thing. You kind of click on these things here now and you get your pop out for the research screen, for the research details, right? And then if you, I've got a issue there with the request, that's okay. And then we've got obviously all the other things. So yeah, click the ones that are invalid. We had some updates to the requirements. Now highlights the state of the required dependency for whatever it is you're looking at. So things that are sort of the next tier up, whatever the next requirement up, are orange. Things that are sort of further beyond that require a few more dependencies are highlighted in red. And this, I'm currently also working on 2 different views for this. So this is currently, that's like a tree view of all the dependencies required for whatever it is that you're looking at. But we'll also have a flat view as well, which is literally just the things that you're missing, right? So you can zero in on those. That's that. We'll go through some more stuff later. As you can see, all of the buttons stuff have had a bit of an update, which is kind of cool. This navigation on the left here is going to be disappearing and going into this little spot here. That's not quite done yet. But that'll all be done, ready for the next test phase. Next, we've got spacecraft production. So, yeah, this has taken a bloody long time, honestly. Way longer than I expected. And there's a couple of reasons for that. The main one is that although the underlying architecture hasn't had to change, which is really nice, so the time warp engine hasn't required any changes, there's just some really unique requirements for spacecraft production that has taken a long time to kind of get across. Also, just ensuring that all of the design, the UI and the UX is consistent across all the screens. I spent a lot of time on that, which has been pretty cool. So, like, this is just not done yet, so I'm not going to be demoing it today, but hopefully we can do that within the next few weeks. But essentially, you can click on the various spacecraft that you want to produce, just like research and infrastructure. If it's not available, it's sort of, it's all grayed out. You can still click it, however, to kind of see that spacecraft that you want to build in the future. You can see all the requirements here as well, just like on research. You can see for the Genesis colonization craft that it requires a lot, obviously. This is basically your first step into off-world colonies, right? And colonizing other planets, excuse me. And then you've also got a profile. So for something like colonization craft, there's not much there. It's just volume and command. So command is the number of command points it requires in your fleet. Your fleets have a maximum amount of command that you can command. And that's basically up to 200 with a soft cap that kind of grows beyond that, but not much more than that. And so then you can look at things like the Wasp, for example, which would basically be one of your first fighter craft. And it has, all the various stats for the spacecraft itself, as well as any weapons that it might have equipped. I also want to, and this is probably pushing a bit too hard leading up to the next test phase, is I want to have the game guide in place. But if the game guide pushes out the test phase by too much, i.e. it's taking me too long to build and kind of get to a state that I'm happy with, then we'll push ahead without it. But the reason why I bring that up is all of these stats and everything, like if you go to requirements, you want to click on one of these things, or you click on the stats or a weapon or whatever, all of those things will be available in the game guide. So you kind of click any of these items and it'll open up in the game guide to show you more details, maybe sort of context, in-game lore, history, what the stats mean, how it applies to combat, all that sort of stuff. So one of the things I want to make really clear to all players is that none of this, there's nothing hidden from you. Even sort of how combat works, how those underlying systems behave, all that's going to be available to you, so you can kind of figure out sort of how to play the game in the best way, and go about that. So just filled out a form to request a playtest. Yep, thank you, Carl. I appreciate that. I hope you provided a lot of details. It's a really requirement to kind of make it through to a playtest. You know, some people are applying with just like one-line things. I'm looking for playtesters that show interest, you know, sort of know how to test things initially, and then sort of as we go further down, we sort of relax those requirements as we're going forward. So if you want an early playtest, you've got to convince me that you should be invited for a playtest. So that's that. That's everything so far. So we'll basically go back to overview screen for the time being, and let's talk about the mission stuff, right? So let me just double check OBS that we're all good. Yeah, everything's nice. Okay. I need another drink of water. I'm gonna be talking a lot. So, let me get my notes to the side here so it's not in the way of chat. So, if it helps, on Laravel View Dev. Oh, okay. Awesome. Cool. I mean, it definitely helps, right? That's what we're built. That's what we're built on, essentially. So, with a smattering of other technologies around the side. All right. So, topics covered that. We've covered the new website coming. Next test phase. Yes, let's talk about the next test phase first, the challenges, and then let's talk about the mission system and sort of what we're going to work on today. So, like I said, I really wanted to have the next test phase available by now, basically the end of February. And there's been a few challenges. The first is that I'm never quite happy with the UI and the UX. Like, it's getting closer every single time I tweak it and play with it, particularly from a consistency perspective. So that, you know, the way the UI and UX feels is just feeling more and more consistent across all the screens as we go. If I go actually back to the infrastructure page, you know, I spent a lot of time working on this. So like when you click on a structure, it shows this little mini screen. And as much as I like this system, I've begun to like it less and less as time has gone on. And the reason for that is because the screen real estate available to all of the information here is like really low, right? So if I go to requirements, for example, or if I go into Orbit, which is even better yet, it's like, you know, I click on, say, the shipyard and go to requirements because it has a lot. Like, it's just a really small screen to show this information, right? It just doesn't work very well. And then, you know, all this other information. Like, if I want to have like a lot of lore there and history for the shipyard, there's just not enough stuff there. Like, it's a real pain, right? So what I really want to be able to do is implement sort of design that looks, you know, much closer to kind of what we're doing here, uses up more screen real estate, can show a lot more information for all of that. So I have, I think, something similar to kind of the way research items work on the infrastructure page, so that this, yeah, maybe it shows on the left here or on the right here, I don't know yet. But just so you've got a lot more information available to you. So it's a lot easier to see. And also in the future, like if you've got, for example, things being produced at the shipyard, like trying to show those details in this tiny little bit of screen area, it's just not going to work. Like, there's just not enough screen. Like if you've got like 12 things queued up for, you know, production, yeah, it's just too small. So this really needs to be, you know, rethought, redesigned, and bring some consistency across from the other screens, right? So let's get back to that. So pretty amazing UI. So, thank you, Cole. Yeah, appreciate it. I mean, I've got a real, like, UI and UX is not what I do in my job, but I have a real passion for it. It's you know, I've built a lot of hobby projects over the years, and my UI and UX skill, I think, has just, you know, gotten better over the years because of those hobby projects. And, you know, I read a lot of books on UI and UX design as well. So it's really important to me that any project I'm working on has a good UI. So one of the other hobby projects I have is a content publishing website called rathetimes.com. So RATHE times.com. It's just a content website, but I spent a lot of time on that design, getting it nice and neat and, you know, really nicely designed for readers, for content consumers, right? But yeah, I really like a nice clean UI and UX. Built stack dev. What's that? Vue. Oh, Inertia, Laravel, and Tailwind. I really like Inertia. Inertia's not being used for this. It's just it would get in my way, as it does. You know, it's frameworks like that definitely have a sort of an opinionated approach to that, which is fine. Like, makes it work really well for things like app development stuff. But for what I'm doing in the game development, it doesn't work so well. Like, a really good example I'll show you, right? So if I go to the Galaxy list page, right? It's just that transition, getting it working really nicely. I've tried doing this. I mean, it does work with routes to a degree with the Vue router, but getting that working just exactly as I want it, I can't get it working exactly how I want at the moment, is why actually all of these screens here are not routes. Like, it's all sort of internal managed game state for what screens we're looking at and sort of managing that as well. So yeah, doing that sort of stuff in Inertia or Livewire, no thank you, not going to do that. So it's essentially a sort of a bootstrapped library around Vue and the Vue router to kind of get a lot of these things working nicely. And also, one of the other branches I'm working on, even the transitions between these screens here are getting a boost stuff as well. So like even stuff like the moving things, like moving the planet in and out and sort of updating the background stuff, it kind of stutters a little bit with the transitions. So I need to figure out how to make it perform better. And my machine's pretty powerful. It's a MacBook Pro M2. So it's just because all this stuff basically happens at the CPU layer. Even when you use CSS to kind of use transformations using the GPU, it just doesn't get it to where it needs to be. So I need to kind of figure out a better approach. So you're just unloading the components. Yeah, there's not much keep alive state there. Although I probably should for some of those things, like maybe the overview page should be kept alive. But I'm a little bit concerned with that just because of the state changes all the time. Like for example, when I finish up a structure site, when I finish completing, there's game state pushes from the server that needs to update various things. And I haven't tested out keep alive yet, but my concern is that it might sort of start working with old state, which is not great. So. Yeah, I've got the M2, but I'll be upgrading to the M5 when they get released. I think they've just been released. But anyway, I get an updated machine for work in May. So it'll be a nice big upgrade from the M2. But even so, outside of that, this on mobile, these transitions, they are gonna not perform very well. So I've got to figure out a better approach there. So hopefully I can maybe have some JavaScript executing, like JavaScript animations executing on the GPU. That would probably be ideal, but who knows? All right, anyways, let's get back to where we were. So, so the next test phase, the production challenges, right? So, they released Wednesday. Okay, cool. So the next test phase, like I said, there's still a few things to do. Like spacecraft production is almost finished. The back-end code is all working. It's all tested and it seems to be working really nicely. One of the things I'm currently working on is, I'll give you just a little bit of info here on production. So what's probably really unclear from the UI, because I haven't designed it very well, and I need to figure that out, is this sort of art at the top is your space station, right? And your space station has a bunch of districts associated with it, different from most structures. The space station can have a lot of different districts. It can have multiple shipyards, multiple hangars, right? So the idea here is that you can kind of select a particular shipyard and then select what spacecraft you'd like to produce at that shipyard, right? And these will be filters at the top, so you'll be able to show just those spacecraft that you can produce at that particular shipyard, or you can see all as I've currently got it now. And so you could have, theoretically, shipyards at different tier levels, right? So you might have a shipyard at tier 2, shipyard at tier 1, shipyard at tier 3. And so they're going to have different capabilities as a result of that. They're going to produce stuff faster. They'll have access to more spacecraft they can develop. And so you'll be able to select the shipyard you want to produce things at, or alternatively, you can sort of let the system auto-select the appropriate shipyard for you if you just select all. Now, there's caveats to that. It'll select the first available shipyard that can produce the craft that is likely to finish that project first. It's quite a word salad, but basically it's trying to be very efficient in regards to which shipyard the project should go to. But maybe you don't want that, right? So maybe you've got two different shipyards, one at tier 1, one at tier 2. Maybe the tier 2 one will just end up producing it faster, and so therefore you can sort of manually select that. Also here you'll be able to see your hangars associated with your station. And so as a result of that, instead of basically being in a build mode when you sort of select your shipyards, you'll be in sort of like a ship management mode with your hangars, right? So moving them from hangar to hangar, do whatever you want to do. And so that's really cool and super interesting. But basically what happens, and what is when I'm talking about that, is when you finish producing a spacecraft, that spacecraft automatically gets moved to the first available hangar that has space. And it doesn't matter if that hangar has a spacecraft in it or not. It'll just select the first available one. And what the thing I'm working on at the moment is, if for some reason when you've queued up your projects you no longer have the hangar space to move that spacecraft to a new hangar, it essentially needs to pause your production queue. And I don't have the technology in place to do that with the time warp engine yet. It's just an extension of what's already there, but I just haven't built it. And so that comes with its own challenges. So I sort of need to work on that as well. So this is a problem that it seems to be fairly unique to spacecraft production, and the rest of the game doesn't really need, at least not at the moment. And so being able to sort of pause that, or having to pause spacecraft production for a shipyard because it can't move the spacecraft out to a hangar is sort of an interesting thing, right? And of course, it'll come with notifications and updates to players so that, if your production queue's been paused, you'll be notified. It's like, hey, you need to sort out this problem, right? And that could be as easy as literally just like kind of assembling a fleet based on the spacecraft in your hangar, right? So it's not that big a deal. Anyways, so that's one of the current production challenges I've got that I'm working through. We also need to work on some UI updates and sort of wrapping that stuff up at the moment. So over on the right-hand side here, you can see spacecraft, how many of that particular spacecraft that you own, how many are actually stationed at this particular colony. So owned is sort of global ownership of that spacecraft, stationed is local to that colony, and then queued is obviously how many you've got queued for production. And then obviously you also see the state change if you've got stuff in production. So the percentage of completion for that. So next thing is observation. So Jun actually, I think, was completely responsible for the observation requirement. So I can't show it yet because I haven't merged in that work yet. But essentially, you'll click on this system button here. It takes you to your local system. You can navigate to neighboring systems. And if you have not observed that system, you can then observe that. You then queue an observation window. That takes a certain amount of time, obviously. And then when that's completed, the observation window gives you an estimate of the resources that are in that system, right? And so you use that as sort of a jumping off point to kind of find the next system, sort of your next colonies, right? So you start with observation windows. You can queue those observations. So maybe you want to queue up 5 at a time or whatever. And then once you've done that, you can then see planets, whether there's an asteroid belt in the system, what's sort of the rough estimate of resources rough estimate of resources within that system. And then you can drill down further. So the reason why production is so important in getting to sort of colonization is one of the first things you'll need to do outside of observing systems is queue up your geologists. So your geologists are basically just like a drone you send off to planets, and they go and scan the planet, right? So you use the observations as a guide. So, maybe you're looking for some polonium or some other rare resource, and then it's up to you to kind of send the drones and figure out which celestial bodies have these resources and try and find a really good candidate for a colony or an outpost, right? So you'll be sending off lots of drones, right? So you start off scanning a system, maybe you've got 6 planets, maybe you've got 15 planets there. And through the game guide, you'll learn like essentially where you can generally find these resources so that you're not wasting time just kind of scanning every single thing. But some resources are going to be found just on asteroids. Some will be found closer to the parent star of the celestial body. Some will be found further out in the system. Some will be found on moons, right? So they'll be relatively limited in regards to where you find them. And so you can just maybe you're looking for polonium. And I don't know exactly where you'll find this yet, but let's just assume that you'll find it on moons, right? So you'll just send out a bunch of geologists to various moons and try and find a good candidate that has the most polonium, right? And then you set up your colony and away you go. And so you'll be building heaps of those, and then eventually you'll build a Genesis colonization craft, and you'll send that off to start a new colony there, right? And then in future, obviously, you'll also just create outposts. So asteroids are too small for colonies. So you can set up a colony, obviously, you need to have something there to kind of work from, but instead of basically setting up a manufactory there to kind of get things moving, you'll set up an outpost. And an outpost kind of is the basic building blocks for asteroids and potentially other things in the future as well. So coming back to the challenges, getting observation completed, which is, as far as I'm aware, is actually done now. It's probably just waiting on final approval from me to kind of get that merged in and working, and then probably have some UI and UX updates. So that's, let's say, 95% completed. And then finally moving on to the mission system, which is what we're going to talk about now. So let's go back to... Oh, we can keep it. I mean, you guys probably want to see the game UI and UX, I guess, more than anything else. We'll keep that open for the time being. So let me just have a little drink here, and then let's get to some development soon. All right, so the mission system. Let's talk quickly just about sort of some objectives I have for the system and kind of where we need to go with that. So first things first is that the mission system needs to be quite malleable to different kinds of requirements. So what I mean by that is some missions are going to be tied to NPC characters that you'll meet in the game. Some will be tied to locations. Like, so for example, maybe you have to go to a particular location, or you just stumble upon a location, right? Either through scanning or whatever. And that will trigger a mission by itself, right? You've also got things like trade missions, or they're basically trade agreements, but they'll be tied into the mission system. So you'll basically create your own missions through things like to trade agreements, as well as things like colonization. So colonization of a colony will be essentially a mission that you create yourself and track that mission. So there's lots of different ways of I don't know what the right word is. I don't know if it's initializing or sort of setting up missions. Some of them will be automatic. Some of them will be created manually. Some of them will be PvP missions, right? So players can create missions with sort of bounties and stuff on them. And so set up some sort of agreement with that player once you've achieved that particular mission. So, there's a lot there we want to do with it. And when I say we, Jan and I had a chat about this the other day, what we could do with it and the lore. And like I said, we're both on the same page. We've both got similar ideas in regards to what we want to do there. And then at least in the early game and throughout the game as you're sort of playing through your progression, the mission system also needs to engage with game mechanics and features. So things like setting up your first colony will absolutely be its own mission for your empire. Things like learning how to sort of build things, research stuff. What else we got there? Scanning, engaging with players. All of those things will be tied to missions for the most part. But one thing to I think it's important to cover here is that as much as I think the mission system would be worth engaging with, both for the story perspective and also just learning the game, it's going to be optional. Like, you don't have to engage with missions. Like, if you understand the game, you've just got a thing that you want to do, a way that you want to play, just ignore the missions. Right? There's no onus on you to kind of engage with it if you don't want to. Though I would certainly employ you to do so. Right? So I think it's it'll be a really nice way. A lot of the missions will have sort of artwork and stuff associated with them, particularly the storyline stuff. Maybe not so much the sort of things around game features and mechanics. But certainly the storyline missions will have a lot of artwork and dialogue and that sort of stuff. Which brings me to my next point is missions need to have content. They need to have dialogue. They need to have storylines associated with it. And so how that's presented, I think, is going to be interesting and challenging because of the different types of missions that you'll have, whether they're manually created by yourself or by other players, or whether they're generated by the system, whether there's a story component to it, all of these sorts of things. The other thing is that as far as the storyline missions are concerned, I think a lot of missions need to have a dependency on other missions, right? So, and this is true even of game mechanics and features, so that, colonization missions should not be available until you've done other missions, such as, creating your first structures and that sort of thing. And I think what's really important to note here, which I haven't noted down here, is if you've already completed something and you come to the mission later, the mission should be done, right? There should be no reason to have to do that thing. Like, for example, let's say, and I'm not saying this is one, but let's just say one of the missions is to create a space station, right? It's like, if you've already created a space station and you're forced to create another space station, it just doesn't make any sense, right? So it needs to autocomplete based on whether you've done that thing or not already. No, I'm not displaying any slideshow at the moment because there's no presentation piece for these. These are basically just like notes and stuff I have on the mission system. So no presentations yet. Maybe I should have done that, but I kind of ran out of time. I spent several hours yesterday just working on getting the dev stream set up as how I'd like, and still wasn't quite 100%. So I didn't have enough time to kind of put a full presentation together, unfortunately. What was I going to say there? So autocomplete if it's already, if player has already completed an objective prior to picking it up, right? So that's really important. And that honestly introduces some really, technically that's really interesting because it means that whenever you complete something, we have to track that thing. And then when you get to that mission, it needs to know that you've already done that thing, right? So that's very different from a system where you pick up a mission and now it's active, right? So now it's sort of listening to sort of things that are going on in the game. So we need to kind of figure that out. It's like, how is that going to work without imposing a performance problem? Having to check all of the missions in the game, right? The other thing is, I think I mentioned this before, is having branching stories. So branching narratives and missions. So if missions have dependencies on sort of precursor missions that need to be completed, we need that sort of dependency chain to also be able to fork into other missions depending on maybe selected dialogue of the players. Like they've selected option A instead of option B. Like maybe you've been presented with an option of going and delivering some cargo or assassinating a target, right? And so they sort of spawn other sort of missions, right? So having these mission chains that players can interact with and sort of supporting that branching requirement, I think is pretty important. Okay, so we've talked about PvE and PvP missions. You could always have the mission but not display to the user. Yeah, that's true. The way I'm thinking about it currently is when you accept a mission, it checks to see if that thing has already been done, right? So, let's say you need to produce, 50, you need to get to 50 materials production or something, right? Checking upon acceptance, not just kind of going to complete it, I think is also sort of a good way to do that as well. The trick with that is just tracking everything, right? I mean, that's obviously something we want to do anyway, which ties into the achievement system, which is actually an interesting point. So maybe the achievement system has sort of implications for missions. So let's note that down. Tracking all things for achievements plus possibly required for missions, right? So, but we'll sort of get through that a little bit later, I think, talking about that. Next, we'll have race and faction-specific missions. And when I say race, we're talking specifically about the race that you're playing, right? So, one of the things I've been thinking about a lot is the monetization of the game, right? So I ask this question to the community relatively regularly, probably at least once a year, because I'm just not sure, right? So my current sort of lean is that I sort of want to charge a subscription for players, but have a pretty generous demo tier, which is basically most of the game's features are available to you to kind of interact with and sort of understand and figure out whether you like the game or not. And so a subscription-based model would mean that content is locked behind that subscription, right? So that when you subscribe, maybe you get access to all the races and all the other the game's features. An alternative, which I've been thinking about a bit recently, is could the game survive on a DLC-based model, which is maybe everybody gets access to all game features, but you only have access to sort of the default human race at the start. And then you sort of pay for the DLCs to kind of get access to the other races sort of as we go over time. And that is tricky for a couple of reasons. The first is that I don't really know how much I could realistically charge for DLC content. And DLC is obviously a bit of a misnomer here because you're not technically downloading content to your computer to unlock it. It's literally just you sort of unlock that stuff as part of the in reality it's basically a live service game, right? It's live. It has to be always connected because things are always happening in the universe even when you're not online, right? So it has to be always online. But yeah, I just don't know if a DLC model fits that. So, if you have some views or opinions or comments on that, I'd love to hear it. And certainly with the rest of the community, if you guys have some further input on that, I'd love to hear it. One of the things I've made pretty clear from the start is I really want to avoid MTX. And I definitely don't want a pay-to-win model. It just goes against everything I believe games should be. So there'll be zero pay-to-win. So which means that, and if there's no MTX there, then, our options are relatively limited. And I don't want advertising in the game. It'll ruin my gorgeous interface that I've developed over the last 3 years, right? It's just like, there's just no ads. Ads can fuck off. Not interested at all. So it's either a subscription model or a DLC-based model or something, something akin to that. So that discussion is still open. And we'll see how we go. So, all right, anyways, what was I saying there? The reason why I went on that tangent, it was talking about races, right? So races and faction-specific missions. So the reason why I brought up sort of a DLC, sort of option is that it would mean that when you sort of purchase a DLC for the game or maybe an expansion is a better word. But you buy an expansion for the game, you unlock that race. And as well as that race, you're unlocking all of their unique technology, their unique game systems, their unique ways of engaging with other players, the unique storyline, unique artwork. So, unlocking a race in the game is obviously, it unlocks a lot. There's a lot of work to be done there. And that's true even outside of a DLC model. Like we still need to work on all this sort of stuff. But it would mean that, you unlock that entire race and everything that stands for. So, so having a subscription-based model would mean that we have one race and its storyline available for free for everybody, but limit some game features. But then when you subscribe, you have access to all the races, all the storylines, all that sort of stuff, right? And you would pay on a monthly or a yearly basis. So welcoming input and insights and everybody's opinions on that, because it is a tricky topic. But of course, the game has to be monetized in some way. Just working out what sort of is good and fair for everybody. So good, obviously, for the business and fair for the players in the community is super important. We kind of need to have a really good sort of crossover there where it's like, maybe sort of 80% fair, 20% good for the business, or 50-50, or, who knows. But we want to make sure that we have the best crossover of the most content and happy player base based on the business model that we're chosen, without the business suffering as a result of that. So that's really tricky. Right, so going back to the mission system. So race and faction specific missions, and then also just like neutral missions, right? So neutral factions, that's the stuff. And as a result of that, one of the things I really love in games is factional reputation. So building up reputation with NPCs, factions. I just think it introduces so much flavor, and it allows us to do a lot of things with that reputation. So, if you've got a bad reputation with a faction, maybe that changes the dialogue. Maybe there's certain missions that just aren't available to you. Maybe you don't get access to certain, blueprints or whatever, right? So, one of the things that isn't in the game yet and won't be for some time, but one of the things I really would like to do is have race and faction specific structures, research options, spacecraft, maybe even certain mechanics that we can kind of introduce, because maybe you've sort of learnt how to, maybe engage in combat in a particular way because of this, learning from this faction, those sorts of things. So I think having faction reputation is really interesting, and I think it can be kind of like a weighted scale, right? So maybe you build up factional reputation with one faction, which then another faction not happy about. So you sort of close yourself off from certain things. But also it just means that maybe in one galaxy you go one direction, right? It's like, I'm going to work with this faction, sort of learn what's there, and then maybe in the next galaxy that you're playing, maybe it's the other faction. You go a different route, right? You're playing a different race. So The idea is like the game is designed to be these sort of short-lived galaxies that you kind of play through over and over again. But the idea is that like there's so much replayability there because you can play as different races, you can interact with different factions, you can take different technology tree options, you can build different structures, maybe build your fleets differently, right? There's just so many options there to kind of replay it, like a good strategy game should be, 4X strategy game should be. But of course, there's a lot to do there to kind of get to that point, but we're on our way. So yeah, so faction reputation associated with missions I think could be quite cool. One of the things I'm playing with at the moment is so player score. Like player score will definitely be a thing in the game, and it's how we sort of rank players based on your player score. And so my question is, and welcoming again input from the community is, should missions contribute to player score, right? I'm sort of umming and ahhing about that because if missions are optional, then it means that the players interact with the missions have an advantage by improving their player score, right? So the player score will be something that we kind of show up here in the UI, and the player score is necessary for sort of ranking players as well. So the higher your player score, that's sort of where we want you interacting and engaging with other players. So within sort of a percentage of your player score. So that sort of starts to if you're engaging, and I mean in terms of combat, with players at a very low player score, you're not penalized so much as the player that's being attacked that you're targeting benefits, right? So I've talked before about having sort of police factions in the game that sort of rush to your aid, kind of give you handicaps, that sort of stuff. So you can still do it, but it's going to impact your reputation and it's going to impact your sort of what you can gain from players. So hopefully through those sorts of mechanisms and some other game mechanics I haven't talked about, we're limiting you to sort of like this band slightly below you, but then also all the way up to the top, right? So you can absolutely target higher players if you want. Of course, if you target players that are much higher than you, that allows them to retaliate, right? So it's important to note those sorts of things. What we've got here. So Carl says, yeah, I hate ads. Yeah, man, I can't stand them. On the Wrath Times, the publishing website I did, publishing websites are just rife with ads, and I hate them. So that website has a subscription model, and the subscription model is just enough to cover author costs. So we pay all of our authors for every article that they publish, and pretty generously so as well. Again, I'd want to make things fair for everybody involved that's contributing, but zero ads. I have no patience for them whatsoever. The quest giver tells you to kick bricks. What? Maybe I missed the context there. I'm not sure there, Carl. What else? Mr. Lollipop. Maybe it should just be a separate rank. Basically a weeb rank for how much you love the lore. I mean, yeah, that's still not a bad idea, actually. Yeah. Like a nerd rank, right? A lore nerd. That's actually not a bad idea. I kind of like that. That's pretty cool. And then maybe also, maybe that sort of rank can unlock other missions, right? So I think that'd be pretty interesting. That'd be pretty cool. Let's note that down. I think that's a really cool idea. So mission / lore rank. Yeah, it's pretty cool. And also, with the achievement system coming, you'll get goodies from that anyway, right? So completing missions, achieving certain things in the game, you'll unlock stuff which gives you, different avatars, badges, all that kind of cool little stuff, right? I know not everybody likes to engage with the achievement system, but it will be there. Like it's going to be in there from the start. So things like, and there'll be like really rare stuff, like, being first on the galaxy at the end of the galaxy's round. Things like being last as well, right? So lots of cool stuff like that. And it'll unlock a lot of stuff for you that's purely cosmetic and not behind a paywall, nothing like that, right? So it's just, as you play the game, you'll unlock more and more stuff. And those unlocks are global. It's not just for the one galaxy. It's like as you play with your player account and you do more and more stuff, you unlock more and more things that come with you every single galaxy that you play in. If you piss them off, those two to kick bricks. Yeah, that's right, yeah. We found this cool thing out in deep space. Why don't you go check it out? Okay, let's keep going. So we've just about covered like all of the objectives and things we want to see with the mission system. So we're going to kind of get to the design step in a second. Actually, what do we do here? That's off. Let me move these notes here out of the way. Oops, wrong spot. Okay, so I think that's actually everything for the mission system. any of you guys have any questions or things you want to talk about? Otherwise, I'm going to start getting into the design phase of this. So it's going to get a lot more technical now. This is really the nature of this. We've already been talking for an hour, but the nature of the stream is a dev stream. So we're going to get really technical, and then we're going to do some more demo stuff at the end. So, all right, what I might do here is I'll get set up, make sure that the environment's set up and ready to go. I've got everything running, I think. We're going to set up a new... I do wonder if you guys can see my... Here's level 100 place you shouldn't go to since you're level 1 there. Yeah, that's right. Okay, let's start getting into some designs. So, what happens if I go over here? Does that show up on here? Yeah, it does. Okay. We don't actually want to use this. This is the progression stuff, but we're gonna... the problem with Lucidchart is I don't have a account, so it might be a bit tricky to do this. Let's see if they let me. I think I'm through my free use of this application. If any of you have any like really good recommendations, by the way, for like design software, please let me know. Because as much as I love Lucidchart and LucidSpark, like they really are really good applications, they're really expensive as well. And it's a subscription thing, and I don't jump in here all that often. So if I could like buy an application that I can use, I'd prefer that. But we'll see what we can do. All right, what are we doing here? Clearly, I haven't used this yet, so let's do engineering, role description. Say intermediate, no. Next. Share start with link document. Okay, yeah, start with link document. Let's see how we go. I think there is a limit on like basically how many. Oh, here we go. Free plan. Up to 60 objects per document. Yeah, so you guys saw here the. So just in case you guys haven't seen this before, like this is I showed this off a couple of years ago now. Actually, like this is not complete yet, but. You can see like these are the early sort of design phases of, this is basically era 1 of player progression. There's basically, I think all of this stuff is actually in the game now, or pretty close to it. What are we missing? All right, we haven't done solar arrays and the microwave receiver yet, but we could probably get that done before launch actually. So the idea there is another alternative energy source for your colonies. Otherwise I think pretty much, and then geothermal's not in place yet either because that's for further out systems. We're not at that point yet. But I think pretty much everything else has been implemented, which is pretty close. Docking bays isn't done yet. Everything else is. Outposts to come soon. This is basically era 2. Whoops. Era 2 stuff. And then we've got, I don't know how well, can you guys see that pretty well? Yeah, you can see. Cool, okay. Yeah, lots of cool stuff here, which we're going to be getting to in the future. So pretty cool. But yeah, because I'm limited to 60 objects, I can't take this any further. I've got to pay for an account. So. And again, I come back to this like maybe once every 2 months, right? Come back here, do a bit of design, do a bit of scoping work. Okay, so let's get to it. So mission system. So I'm going to keep my notes up here as well. Unfortunately, I don't have a separate screen, but we'll see how we go. Oh, 1 second. Daddy needs some nicotine. All right. So I'm just thinking through, I'm going to have to get myself into a habit here of talking while I'm thinking. So this is one of the tricky things, right, is starting from square one. I could absolutely just use AI and go, hey, this is all our requirements, give me the design. But actually, design and software architecture and software engineering is like my favorite thing to do. So in my role, I'm a CTO. And so a lot of my work is actually in designing systems, working with other engineers who are designing systems, brainstorming back and forth, that sort of stuff. And I absolutely love it. I find it very juicy, gets the brain really, really going. So, and I like coding those systems as well. But once it kind of gets to stuff that's a bit more mundane and boring and, just kind of working through and debugging stuff, that's when I like to use AI, sort of help me with that sort of stuff, because that stuff can really slow you down. And I guess it's true also that sort of system and software design can slow you down as well, but I just really like doing it. So that's why we're doing it today. That's why we're going to do, go through design and then start implementing as much as we can in the next couple of hours. Okay, what we got here? Pretend you are doing a dev interview in 2026 without AI. Man, I haven't not done a dev interview in 16 years, so I don't know what it's like these days. I mean, interview lots of people, but I think the way we approach interviews for engineering at my role is quite different from what I hear from the rest of the industry. The rest of the industry, I think, is, for the most part, not a very good approach, in all honesty, but it is what it is. Okay, so let's start some tonight. So what we can probably do here is, where's our mermaid? Where's our mermaid thing? So in Lucidchart, what you can do is use diagrams as code. So it allows us to move quite quickly without having to do the design all the time. There we go, diagram as code. But I'll have to remember how to do this because it's been a while. So first thing I'm going to do, let's do this. I'm probably going to have to check in on. I was just only on a paid account. All right, screw it. We're not doing diagram as code. Then we're going to do it. We're just going to do this. I'm just thinking how best to start this. Which side to start from? We could start from the data side. Do an ERD. I'm not a huge fan of that approach. I like to think of the systems themselves because I tend to find that the data requirements emerge from the design, particularly as you sort of define boundaries around the system and sort of what things interacting with one another, and sort of what data needs to be denormalized and that sort of stuff. So I think that's important. So look, let's just start with the model because I think that's an easy starting point. Where's our shapes here? Let's do not the swim lane. This one? Not the swim lane as well. Where's our ERD? Oh, we want UML. That's what we want. UML. UML class diagram. And we might want a sequence at some point, actually. So let's do a sequence shapes as well. UML deployment, UML entity relationship. No, that's it. Let's do that. Okay. Let's do that. So now I've got these here. So if you haven't used Lucidchart and Lucidspark, Lucidspark is really amazing for collaborating and brainstorming, particularly if you're doing things like if you're in the domain-driven design world, doing event storming and stuff with Lucidspark is really, really nice. It's a really cool system. So at work, we actually do pay for this product, which is why I use it personally as well. So that's why I use it. Like I said, if you've got suggestions for other software, I'll be happy to look into that as well. It's so much fun. They typically just give you a prompt and tell you to do that and explain everything you were thinking doing as you would do it. Are you talking about working with AI? It's so much fun to work with AI, is that what you mean? I'll come back to that in a second. Okay, so let's start. So we're going to start with the model class because we're working in Laravel. So let's start there because we're going to need a mission class, right? So mission. We're not going to worry about attributes for the time being because we're talking about this from a design perspective. The attributes are less important at this point. What have we got here? All right, Carl hasn't responded yet. That's all good. How many have we got with us at the moment, actually? Oh, no, dev interviewing. Oh, it's so much fun. Oh, right, okay. So, like working with AI, really. Give it a prompt and then watch it think and step through everything. It's pretty funny, actually. Okay, cool. So there's two parts to missions, right? We've got the mission itself, which is actually sort of a static piece of content because, actually, one thing I didn't cover actually is I want to have sort of procedural missions later, sort of towards the end game. So, did I talk about that? Because I've got it as a note here. Random procedurally generated missions. So alongside the storyline, you'll also get just sort of random procedurally generated missions as well. But that'll be tied into the lore. Hopefully. So, if we can, one of the cool prospects of AI is that if we can train an AI model on our own lore, the game itself and its systems, then we can use AI to sort of generate missions, hopefully, that can, send you to NPCs and do all sorts of really cool stuff. So we really want to do that in the future for endgames. So you've kind of got this constant mission system for all your factions and stuff that you can work towards and sort of build up that factional reputation stuff, right? Okay, cool. So like I said, now I'm thinking about it, actually, mission probably isn't like the mission itself actually isn't a model. The mission itself, for the most part, I think is static content. But if we have procedurally generated missions, then that'll have to get created in a database because each procedurally generated mission will be unique to you as a player. So another player might get a very similar mission type, but the content will be different, right? So that's an interesting requirement. So maybe we do need to have missions that are actually sort of all set up in the database. So let's do that. So let's have a generate method because at some point we're going to generate missions. We want to be able to respond to missions. So respond from a player. Now so this is really interesting. We've got these missions that are available to the player, and then we sort of need this tracking component of their active missions and how they're either responding to them or any state that is associated with that mission. So for example, if a mission is asking you to go to a particular location, we need to kind of track the state of the fact that they have visited that location, right? So we need some term here that's associated with a mission that is really on the player's side, right? So I mean, we could call it something like accepted mission, although I think that's a horrible term. But maybe it's a task, right? Not a bad idea actually, because a mission could have multiple tasks, right? So that's not a bad idea. So let's call that tasks for the time being. So a mission could have a task, and we also need a way of interacting with these things together. So generally in DDD, by the way, to be clear, like who was it that brought up DDD? Someone asked a question. Oh, actually, I've got questions here actually for questions. Yeah, so Arden. Oh, that's right. So yeah, Arden responded really early on, I think. I'm not sure if it was on the stream prior to that or... Oh, no, it was on Discord. That's why I was chatting to Arden. So Arden asked, I saw your post about the mission system stream. I'm actually curious, when you're designing something like that, do you usually start from domain modeling first or technical constraints first? That's a really good question. So actually, can you guys see these topics? No, you can't. I thought you might be able to. Oh, that's because I'm on the screen. Okay. I think it's a combination of factors. So technical constraints can be applied depending on the business requirements. So let's say, for example, you need to have good full text search support, but you don't have that technology capability in your current stack. So, I mean, obviously you can do full text search with MySQL. Postgres has a really amazing full text search system. But maybe you want to use a technology that's built for that, like Elasticsearch or Algolia, or or maybe you want to use a vector embedded database, which is probably one of the best solutions for that sort of thing, which is also used for backing AI MCP servers and that sort of thing. So if that becomes a requirement, the question needs to be asked is like, does that affect the domain modeling? And I think the general answer to that is no, not usually. Usually something like that, it becomes a projection off of your domain events. You project those out to a vector embedded projection or Elasticsearch projection or whatever it might be, to kind of give you that querying read model capability that you might not have had, or you might have had with other systems, but isn't as good as you might want. We're actually going through something like this at the moment in my role. At my company, and the reason for that is because we don't, even though we're using MySQL on the back end and we have done for the last 15 years, you can't do natural language search with MySQL, right? Using something like Elasticsearch or a vector embedded database allows you to use analogs or synonyms for various terms and words, and even multi-language support as well, particularly with Elasticsearch. So, making sure that we have that capability available to us for good full text search is really important. So to come back to your question, I think domain modeling is the right starting point, because what tends to emerge from that is technical requirements and constraints as well. Yeah, man, I love Postgres. Postgres is just, whenever I see it, not hating on Taylor, I really love Taylor. I think he's an awesome guy, and just like the amount of work he does for Laravel and like what he's done is truly incredible. But I think his view on MySQL is somewhat dated and potentially, and this is being a bit bold, maybe a little bit naive, because the capability of Postgres is just so far beyond MySQL, it's incredible. Like MySQL still doesn't have good JSON indexing support. Like it's awful. And these days, you kind of want this sort of relational database with no SQL support. So you sort of like want document support alongside that. And Postgres does that so well. So, being able to have like really good JSON index support alongside your relational database is amazing. Not to mention, of course, that Postgres has just these incredible plugins that you can layer on top of it. Like you can create, or you can layer on top of your database a vector embedded solution on Postgres with an extension, right? So MySQL just doesn't have that sort of capability. But I will say this is like, MySQL is made for developers who haven't done computer science. And I haven't done computer science, by the way. I was horrible with study, but I came to sort of value just how good Postgres is in the sort of last 5 years or so. I think it's changing behind the scenes. I wouldn't be surprised if L13 goes Postgres. Oh, really? I haven't seen any of that from Taylor. But happy to be proven wrong. Okay, so hopefully that answers your question. If you have any follow-ups, let me know. Okay, so coming back to this, right? Coming back to the design. So yeah, I think task might be the right approach, or mission task, right? So mission task. So when a mission is accepted, I don't know if I want to put accept here, actually. So what's already emerging here, right, is that like we've got this sort of boundary already around. There's a way to do a container. How do I do container? Is it the group that does it? Do it? There's a way in Lucidchart to kind of create this really cool. It's not on group. It's not grouping. What is it? Maybe it's a shape. Let's have a look. Container. I think that's it there. Let's have a look. You selected shapes. So if I do this, no. I don't think that's it actually. Or was that just it? No, this isn't it. I can't remember what it's called. There's a really nice way of grouping things in Lucidchart, which gives you like a nice label and everything. Let's have a look. Smart container. No, that's not it. All right, whatever. We'll just use a basic shape to do it for the time being then. Shapes. Hey, what are my shapes? Oh, right. Cool. Okay. Let's just do this one. Maybe it's like this. Maybe I can do. Sorry, I'm just trying to figure this out. This is the kind of thing like I get stuck into for no real reason. Screw it. Let's do this. We want the background to be transparent, and we'll send this to the back. Send it back. Okay, so we're going to group this together. So the reason I want to point this out is that there's already, like, I was talking this through, no, this isn't ERD. We're kind of talking about a class diagram at the moment, and starting to already sort of create a boundary around that. So is it here? No, it's not. There's a really nice way to kind of label things. It's not a note, I don't think. No. All right, whatever. Okay, so why do I bring this up? So the reason I say added that there is I think we can lock this for the time being. Yeah, it's just locked for the time being, so I don't have to interact with it. Is we're going to have missions available to players. Those missions will create mission tasks for the players to interact with, right? So we want something like here. So, a mission task can be completed, right? And this is obviously associated with a mission itself. So this will be belongs to relationship in Eloquent, right? And then, so we want a way of interacting with this, so because we have a lot of crossover here, so let's create just a mission manager for the time being. I don't like this term, but use it for the time being. We want to be able to do things like this. So what we're now looking at here is this is likely going to be like a boundary. Like if we're talking about DDD, this will be like a boundary service. So if you have to interact with this domain in any way, you don't want to be interacting with the models directly. And the reason for that is because what happens when you do that is, particularly if they have relationships and you're interacting with those relationships outside of the domain, you start to have this leakage of the underlying Laravel code and systems, so for example, the mission class, throughout your code base. And if you've ever had to replace that stuff, as we have done it in my company, if you have to replace that throughout the code base, it's a really expensive piece of work. So we had to do a similar thing with field values, like custom fields and their values, and they were everywhere throughout the application. And so untangling that mess was a real pain in the ass. So we want to have a way of interacting with this domain without having to touch these things from outside of that domain, right? So mission manager or something like that would be a way of doing that. All of the AI stuff. Yeah, you're right. AI is changing a lot, and Taylor's really embraced that. And I think for good reason. AI is not going anywhere. Large language models are just getting so good. Like if you've ever worked with like Claude, Opus 4.5, and in particular 4.6, and even their fast mode, holy moly, it's just incredible. I was doing something for work the other day, and I had a problem that I was having, like I had an issue that I was having problems debugging and figuring out what the hell was going on. And so I worked with Claude Opus 4.5 to kind of come to a solution, and just watching it do its thing. And this is also inside a service called Augment. So Augment Code is a pretty expensive AI solution, but it allows you to select models from a range of different companies depending on the task that you're doing. But watching the Augment agent work with the various models I was using and sort of stepping through everything and getting it all done and showing me what was going on it's pretty impressive. It's pretty impressive at this point. Whereas like, go back just 3 years ago, I wasn't impressed with AI at all. I think I started working or playing with ChatGPT 4.0. And it just it had nowhere near the capabilities it does today. One of those config as we speak. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's stuff like that, right? That's just like boring. You don't really want to like spend a lot of time doing it. Let AI do it, right? But this sort of stuff that we're talking about today, designing systems and implementing them, like I love that stuff. Like AI is not going to touch that. Okay, so we'll have a mission manager that's going to interact with these two pieces, right? So let's draw some lines here. What we want to do here is create... I always forget the UML things. It always annoys me. I think this one's composition, but it's not composition. We're going to be initializing this stuff likely with it. So I think it's a black arrow for that one, but I can't remember, honestly. Oops, wrong arrow. Whoop. This side. Oh, I thought we had a big arrow here. Oh, whatever, that'll do. And then we're gonna have one here as well, right? Come on, what are you doing? To there. Right, so mission manager is going to be interacting with mission task and mission internally. So it's not a composition API. It needs to kind of fetch things and do stuff. So what it will actually probably need is some repositories. So we're gonna need a mission task repository. And we're going to need a mission repository as well to represent the two models. So a lot of people, I see a lot of sort of discussion on the web about repositories. I actually saw an article a few weeks ago about bad patterns in Laravel or something like that. And I've been meaning to do actually a video on my own personal channel regarding the takes on that, because I think that they're pretty bad takes, in all honesty. My sort of view of the Laravel community is that I think a lot of engineers, developers are not working on bespoke products. They're working on sort of, they're working in agencies, doing service-based work. There's nothing wrong with that, but I think that does color the approach to development in a particular way. And what I mean by that is if you're developing a project and you're sort of, handing that off to a client at some point, and you're not responsible for that for sort of 4, 5, 10, 15, 20 years, as I've been with various products and things, that tends to bend the approach to development in a very significant way, right? Because if you're not maintaining this sort of legacy system over a long period of time, a lot of these approaches to design and implementation do not have the value that you would have on a system that's going to be around for a really long time, right? If your agency is not managing that stuff for a long time, it doesn't make any sense. I mean, even to the case of like writing tests, like we've hired engineers that have no experience with writing tests, right? And so, it's not a requirement to do the job, but you need to be able to learn that stuff pretty quickly, right? Because if you've got a system that's changing all the time organically, if you don't have tests in place, like you're heading into deep bad water, right? But things like repositories and value objects, service classes, domain boundaries, all this stuff makes less sense when you're developing a project that's short-lived with your agency, as opposed to a company that has its own products that's developing that over a very long time, right? So that's why I have things like repositories and value objects and a bunch of other stuff. And this is why I sort of go through these design steps as well. Because I think it's really important for Halcyon Online, which I want to live as long as possible, has a really good foundation right from the start. And so far, it's working out pretty well. We change things, stuff breaks because of the tests, we fix it up, we're good to go, right? If you have to do all that stuff manually and test it all the time, man, you're signing up for a hard road. But I also freelancer that wants things that, yeah, exactly. I mean, I'm exactly the same. Even hobby projects like the Rough Times, which is just me developing, I have tests everywhere, right? Need some water, talking a long time. So we'll have a mission task repository. We're going to have a mission repository. So the idea here, if you haven't worked with repositories before, is that the mission manager and any other service classes are not querying for these things right off the model, right? So, you've got things like, you've got these methods like this, for example, select on your models. There's two reasons for this. The first is it allows us with the repositories to encapsulate the behavior in Eloquent and not have those leaky abstractions throughout the code base. Like if you ever have to replace Eloquent, I pray that you never have to if you're using it heavily. But if you ever have to replace it with something else and you're not using repositories, good luck to you. You're in for a hard time. And the business may just say, no, we're not doing it, right? It's going to cost too much money. Repositories help you to abstract that away, implement interfaces on your models, so that you're working with the interfaces, not direct. I mean, you're working with obviously the implementation, the concrete implementation, but you're not. I'm not asking the model of stuff. I'm asking the interface of things, right? And so if I have to replace a model with some other class that's maybe working with Elasticsearch or some other data storage medium, I literally just replace the underlying model and I implement a new repository and all your code should work. So that's why we do that sort of thing. Okay, so don't use the repo pattern. You're not going to convince me otherwise. Okay, so yes, we'll have these two repositories, right? So we're working with these things here. We've got the mission manager, and the mission manager is what we'll be interacting with outside of this. Double down on Eloquent and everything. It's one of the things I really dislike about Laravel is that it's so heavily tied to Eloquent. I've been of a mind for a while to basically set up a bootstrapped, because you know how like Laravel now has the ability for you to use your own sort of bootstrap templates. I really want to build my own that's, I don't want to say enterprise, but enterprise focused, right? So it'll be built for individuals such as myself or companies that are aware of these sort of dangers and problems, working with things like Active Record and having all this stuff tightly coupled to a system that sort of implements all of the features and stuff that Laravel has, but through a system that is out of the box ready for corporate use, right? Without having to do all this stuff yourself. Okay, so let me go back to my notes here quickly. We've got mission, law, and rank. So missions, let's replace this because missions come first, right? Let's move this over here. Missions are going to have things like, now we'll start working with attributes, right? So we'll have should we say content, mission content, right? So, or maybe description, law, background. Let's call it description for the time being. We'll also have a name, obviously. So we've got a name for the mission, or title. I think name's probably better. Description. We're going to have dependencies, right? So missions made to be dependent on one or more other missions. So we're going to have, it won't be here, there'll be a many to many. So we'll do many to many. Yeah, many to many, because missions can have other mission dependencies before them, and those missions can have more than one mission dependency. So we're going to need, yeah, we'll have a one-to-one, many to many, sorry, to other missions. So what would we call that? Let's call it I don't like the word dependencies, but is it many to many or has many through? No, many to many. Right. Yeah, I don't like precursors. What's another better name for that than dependencies? Precursors. Oh, not requirements. Prerequisites. Prerequisite missions, something like that. Prerequisites is kind of nice. Prerequisites could also be other things, like maybe it wouldn't have to be a mission. Maybe it could be, so this could actually be like a polymorphic many to other things. It's like maybe you need to have missions completed, but then maybe you also need to be a spacefaring civilization, for example, right? Like maybe you need to have, a space station at tier 2 or something. I don't know. But that could be kind of cool. I can't see how many we've got listening in. Let me have a quick look here. Participants. Participants is like, I think everybody that's there. I know there is a way to kind of check that. So anyway, it's all good. So far, I know we've got at least 2. So okay, let's talk about the next piece. So we've got missions. Missions have prerequisites. We can generate missions. Let's remove generate for the time being, just because that's like a long game feature. We're not worried about that just yet. Missions can have multiple mission tasks. Yes. Actually, there's two pieces to this actually, because you've got the mission itself having its own tasks. What am I trying to say here? So you've got the mission itself as part of its description and requirements has its tasks, right? Then we have this relationship to a mission task, which is also associated with a player. Actually, it wouldn't be an empire. I think it'd be the empire, because it's, yeah, we'll have a relationship to the empire. Belongs to. So this is essentially the requirements on the player, right? So we're going to create an empire out here, because it's well outside of this domain. And in a lot of ways, we may not even interact with this within this system, but we'll see, right? I have a question whether or not missions need to be tied to a galaxy or not in terms of the database records. I don't think we do, because I don't think... Which means like the missions need to be generated for each galaxy, but that's okay. You know, we can create them. No, we don't need galaxies, that's fine. Like if they're all global, they're all the same. It does make it more difficult for galaxies running on different versions though. That could be tricky. Maybe other races as well. Sorry, don't use the red button, double down everything. It says there are 6 currently. Oh, 6. Oh, cool. Thanks, Lollipop. I am loving this. You mean the approach, like what we're doing now, Carl? Or maybe other races as well? Lollipop, what did you mean by maybe other races as well? Do you mean for missions? That's a good point, actually. Okay. Yeah, I don't think missions need to be tied to galaxies, because they'll be global. They'll be the same for everybody all the time. Oh, actually, no, that's not true, actually, because if I'm working on other missions and stuff coming up, I don't want to deploy an update and then have those missions suddenly available for players. So this does need something to restrict the missions you have access to. Let's just go with Galaxy for the time being. So Galaxy ID, right? Just for the time being. And I think that'll probably change in the future because I don't think that's the right constraint there, but in the fact that I know what you're talking about, to understand language. Oh, right, okay, cool. I mean, that's the idea, right? The idea behind the dev stream is to give the community some insights in regards to sort of what I'm working on, but also anyone who's sort of tech savvy and working on Laravel, because I posted on Laravel Reddit and a few other things to kind of join in and kind of see how someone in my position might approach this sort of thing. Because I don't think there's much of this sort of stuff out there, if I'm being completely honest. Most of the, like, I guess you could kind of talk about this as sort of like an interactive tutorial, right? There's not much out there with this sort of thing. Usually, people who, content creators who do this sort of thing, just sort of have a sort of a scope in mind. They kind of want to work through that, and that's great. People need to see that sort of thing. But this is literally like, I'm not even sure where we're going with this, right? So it's kind of cool to kind of think through this out loud and go through the motions. Okay, so I think missions do need to be tied to Galaxy, at least for the time being, but maybe instead we'll have like a version, or who knows? We'll see what's going on there. Alternatively, if I think this might be the right idea, right? I think we should probably have a way of seeding missions on a per galaxy basis. So when I create a new galaxy in the back end, it seeds the available missions into the galaxy. And that's kind of a cool thing, because what it means is the mission content, the static mission content, can be generated from YAML files. So I'll give you a quick look here. So actually let me go here. So we'll go to development. Whoops. So if you guys can see the code and stuff here, we'll start seeing some code here soon. So in the game data, we have basically all these YAML files and things. And then at the moment, we have like this multilingual support file called assets. So basically, even though we don't have multilingual support yet in the game, I'm trying to bake it in as much as possible so that when we do start translating the game for various languages, this is already available, ready to go for translation, right? So the idea behind the reason why I was talking about, let's go back to, oh crap, what am I, is it presentation? Let me see. No, not presentation. How do I go back to development? Does development show the entire screen? Oh crap, I've lost the thing, sorry. How do I get back to, oh, it's the game. It's the game one, sorry. I've got to switch between the various screens for presenting on OBS. What was I saying there? Yeah, so I just kind of showcase some of the stuff there. So the reason I bring that up is when it comes to missions, if I have to seed them for each galaxy, I can basically have the static mission content with multilingual support baked into these files already, and then just seed the galaxy so that that way the galaxy mission content stays the way it is, and I have no fear of deploying changes to missions or whatever and sort of affecting the existing galaxy, which I think would be a really bad outcome. It could really screw up players, I think. Like, let's say, for example, I change the task on something, right, and then deploy it. It's like, oh, crap, someone's on that mission, and suddenly it's broken, right? We definitely don't want that. So once it's kind of seeded, that's it. We leave it alone. Unless, of course, we need to do some bug fixes on a mission, of course. Agree, they're pretty single focus, yeah. Lollipop says, would you have galaxy events? If so, maybe some missions are no longer possible if a race is annihilated or a star system is destroyed. That's a really good question and a really good idea. We will definitely have galaxy events. There's no doubt about that. And I've got a really rough idea at the moment of the emerging, like where I sort of want the emerging storyline to go. And at the end game of probably the first couple of galaxies, players will be engaging in a lore-based event, which is going to be pretty cool and pretty epic, I think. And the outcome from that event will drive the storyline for the next sort of chapter, right? So the idea here is we'd really like to be able to sort of release big storyline updates with the release of new factions and races, particularly races, because that's what players will be playing with, but also on a year-to-year basis. So like the story is constantly evolving and doing stuff, right? So, the sort of the outcomes from the player base and the community, and even like just discussions and things, right? are incorporated as part of the storyline for the next year or next subsequent years. So, much like that, sort of like things like the World of Warcraft storyline, it like continues to evolve and implement new things. But I think having the player base interact with that storyline in a meaningful way that impacts the storyline moving forward is really exciting. Jan and I were talking about this just the other day. So again, we're both on the same page with what we want to do there. So, but yeah, I've got a really cool idea, which I haven't run by Jan yet, and I'm not going to discuss that here today, of sort of driving the first year or two of storyline and sort of where we end up at the end of that time period, and then sort of what happens after that fact. So I think it's going to be really cool, really exciting. But yeah, so coming back to your question again, Mr. Lollipop, about Galaxy events. We want to be able to generate events that players can interact with. And these will mostly be sort of combat engagements, but we're talking like big combat engagements. We're talking about like everybody's fleets kind of heading to various sectors and things to achieve particular outcomes. And then having that drive sort of changes in the galaxy over time, which I think would be pretty awesome. But yeah, like, having like worlds and stuff disappear and like, leaving back the remnants of that. And like maybe that unlocks certain rare resources on, who knows? Like I think the potential here for the narrative and game mechanics and features for the player base is just like, there's a lot of opportunity, a lot of potential, which I'm very excited about. So, okay, back to this. So missions being restricted to we see them on a per galaxy basis, which means we're going to need a sort of basically a mission seeder or something when we create a galaxy. So for those that are unaware, it may not be, when I create a new galaxy, we have this, actually you can't see the code here, so let me share some code here, because the whole point of this is actually to get in some code. So how do I go back to this? Oh yeah, so development. Let's go back to development. Hopefully you guys can see that. Yep, get rid of that. Okay, so yeah, so when I create a galaxy, the galaxies have like a whole bunch of I'm going to say there's a heap of configuration that we can apply to galaxies, like how many sectors are there, how many planets per system, we can randomize it if we want, what resources are there, all sorts of things. So we basically seed a galaxy every single time we create a new galaxy with all of this different content. And so one of the things I think we would really want to be able to do is when we seed that galaxy is create the missions that are available for that galaxy, right? So back to the game, double check them. Yep, I'm good. Okay, yeah, so we'll need some sort of seeder for seeding the missions. Let's unlock this now because I need it. It's getting, actually, you know what? Let's just, it's still locked. Let's actually just get rid of this for the timing. I'll draw it. I'll draw it in later once I clean up the diagram. Because this will absolutely be used to drive the development. There's no doubt about that. So yeah, so I have a mission seeder. Seed missions, right? And that's going to have to read from probably YAML files and translations, but maybe we can drive it off translations. Although I don't really like that idea. I don't like tying logic to translation strings. It's easier and it's simpler, but it limits you, because what tends to happen is you find you have some configuration, you have some details there, and then suddenly you're starting to throw that stuff into translation files. It doesn't make any sense, right? So having configuration of missions done through something like YAML or PHP or whatever it might be is just... The reason why I talk about YAML, by the way, like, I'm not a huge fan of YAML as a format, but when it comes to having to quickly modify things, read through all sorts of stuff, YAML is just much better than using something like PHP, which is obviously native and easy to work with, but using YAML is a lot easier. So if I go back to development here for a second, actually, and show you some of our YAML files. So for example, if I look at the Genesis colonization craft, yeah, this is all the configuration and stats and stuff for that, right? I could absolutely have this in PHP, but having to work with quotes and array structures and all sorts of things, it's just like, this is much easier, much better to work with, right? You could also do JSON, but it has the same sort of problem. So that's why we use YAML. So this will need to read from YAML. It'll seed the missions. It'll obviously create all of these things. So that means that the mission seeder needs to work with the repository. So we can draw a line there. As we're working with missions. from that. I think that's probably it for the time being for that piece. Mission is a hard dependency for the mission repository. Okay, cool. So that's that. So we can see our missions. We'll have a bunch of mission records. How many we'll have, I'm not sure. Like, we want to have a pretty cool mission, like I said, storyline missions, right? Oh, actually, yeah, we need mission type, right? Type. And this will require an enum, so let's take that out. Where's our UML stuff? I really want a UML diagram that doesn't have... Oh, perfect. That's what I want. Because I don't care about attributes sometimes. So we want a mission type enum, right? Actually, let's do it this way. Usually what happens when I do this sort of thing is I'll have like a template in place. Like, you know, in our work account, I've got a whole bunch of templates for sort of all these various classes and object types and that sort of thing. And so they actually get color coded. So it's really easy to see at a glance once you get used to the color coding. It's like, oh, that's an enum, that's a bot class, that's an interface, right? I'm going to have basically two things for enum, right? So, well, there'll be a few different mission types. So let's just rename this. And because of Lava Eloquent, the cool thing about that is this automatically gets cast. So we don't need to worry about we do need to worry about the casting, but it handles it automatically, which is really nice. So we're going to have probably a few here. So we'll probably have like a story-based mission type. We'll have a player-based mission type. And then probably maybe procedural or random generated. I'm not sure. One of those three. So for ERDs, I use something. Okay, so we've got a mission type here, right? Mission type process, move down here. Right, we've got, okay, so I think that's good for now. Mission type, description will be a string, right? We've got, name will be a string. Actually, interesting. If the missions are going to be sitting in translation files, the name actually won't be here. But we could do something like this, right? So we could do this and encapsulate the behavior so that when we need to fetch the name from a translation, we can do it here on the model, right? So we don't need that. We do need some sort of mission ID though. And I'm not talking about like an auto-incremented ID or anything like that. This could probably be a string which points to, whoops. Let's just do like this, right? This is our YAML file of mission configuration. Yeah, maybe this points to this. Yeah, this, where are we? Points to this, right? So it'll be YAML plus translation, right? Actually, probably don't need to, actually no, I'm wrong there because it's just the translation. We don't need the YAML because the YAML is used to generate the missions when we see the galaxy. So we don't have a reference there, we have a reference to the translations here. Directly to the translation. Cool. Creators A generates ERD using code. Sorry, what? Are you talking about like diagram as code kind of thing? Carl? Because I know you can do that. One of our engineers actually the other day took a really novel approach. So we walked through the design of a new system he was building, and he did it in Mermaid, so diagram as code. A little bit of back and forth there, but not much. It was actually a really good design. And he basically used the diagram as code to generate the initial code using AI. So basically the skeleton of the entire system was done in a few seconds, or let's say a few minutes maybe at most. And then he basically went through and implemented it all. Whoops. Okay. Actually, you know what? I'm just going to check Discord quickly. I don't know if you guys can see this or not. No, you can't. Okay, let's see if anybody has any questions from there. No, no questions. Okay, that's fine. So we'll stick to our thing. All right. So, yeah. So the mission name and the description both needs to reference essentially translations, not like they wouldn't be attributes here. So the mission record. Do we even need mission records then? Yeah, we do, because mission task is generated for the players. That's pretty important. Huh, that's pretty cool. You can collaborate together. Okay, yeah, we definitely need this. We need a record in the database for that. It's free. What do you mean it's free? Like, are you referring to like a product you use, Carl, or something else? Okay. Yeah, so the mission class will return a name and a description for that. The tasks themselves, though, is interesting, right? So we'll have this record and this object here that represents a mission task, which is a combination of the mission and the empire, so the player's empire. And we'll need one of those for each mission task we actually have. So we need something here to reference to tasks that are generated, and I suspect this will probably be an array, right? With one or more. Like, mission always has at least one task, so it needs one or more tasks. But that task array I don't know if we need too much here. Like, for example, let's go over here, right? So let's just actually, no, before I do anything, I'm just going to create a new branch here to work from. Commit my old code. Development. Can you guys see? You guys let me know if you can see like my console stuff popping into the window or not. I don't know if you can. I think you can only see PHP Storm for some reason, which is, I've got something wrong there. Hang on, let me change back to the game presentation. I've set up something wrong for development. Oh, no, it says you can see the desktop, but you can't see the console. Maybe that's a console setting. Oh, you can see the console? Oh, okay. Okay, good. All right. All right, then, let's go back to it. I need to get rid of... I need to minimize OBS here, I think, because I don't really need it, I think, now. Hope it doesn't break anything. Oh, close out. Don't need that either. Go away. Okay. You guys let me know if anything goes wrong there. Okay. Fixes for production manager and added unit manager. Okay. Hello, Ghosty. Man, I was watching Ghosty the other day. Ghosty uses up a ton of CPU. I couldn't believe it. I don't understand why. Maybe it's because I had like npm run dev running. These two together were using up 200% CPU, which is just blows my mind. I have no idea why npm uses so many resources, particularly with something like Vite. It's just boggles the mind. Anyway, let's do git checkout -b feature mission system. And we'll do the same thing here over on the client. So, what do we do there? Depends on, oh, that's right. Yep. Updated UI UX for the production builds. Yep. Push that up as well, and we'll start a new branch there. Feature. Oop. What am I doing? Yeah, no, it's really not. It's really unfortunate too, because it does run in parallel. But as far as I'm aware, Node is still, despite the fact that you can do asynchronous operations and parallelism, still only runs on one CPU, which honestly boggles the mind. Particularly when it's running on something like V8, which is Google's underlying JavaScript engine. It's like, surely they would have figured this out by now, right? It's bizarre. Anyway. What was I going to say? Oh, yeah, okay. So what we want to do here, I think, is just sort of play with the idea of... If I alt-tab to the browser, can you see that as well now? It should be showing the whole screen, but I'm not entirely sure. Or at least a portion of the screen, anyway. Just to stops me from having to constantly press the buttons on the stream. Anyway, so what I want to play with here is have a look at what tasks might look like in the code, right? So it's it's sort of a mini spike. So in my opinion, we'll kind of start with the translations, You can see Lucid. Oh yeah, cool. Okay, that's fine. Yeah, so we want to go back and forth. Yeah, cool. Perfect. Great. Thank you. Okay, back to this then. So that means when I Alt Tab, you can see all the stuff. I gotta be careful not to Alt Tab to private stuff. Let's go to our translation. So game data, we've got assets here. So let's create a new file here for the time being. Missions. I was going to kind of play with the idea of, what do missions look like, right? One thing that's tricky here is how do we create mission dependencies, prerequisites in this? And I think that's why we need YAML for that. So if I go to assets here in game data, we'll create, oh no, this is, sorry. No, this is right. Where's my YAML files? Oh, here, data, sorry. So game data, like this module, this domain is all about the sort of more static content within the game. So things like, for example, a unit has a representation as an object, as a class. Structure has a representation as well. But these are not the player-built structures, which are also called a structure in a different domain. This is like the static assets and the data associated with them. So building that whole system took quite a while. So I think what we need to do is we basically need a new sort of category of assets, which is missions, right? And we're also going to have data associated with that. So missions, and we're going to have, so at the moment, the way asset data works is each of one of these things represents a single entity. So we've got the depository highlighted at the moment. So this is all about the depository, build time, all that sort of stuff. So I think we'll have to do a similar sort of thing with missions, though it probably needs a bit more of a hierarchical structure than the flat structure I have for all of these things, because they're not, all these things have things like dependencies, right? Things you have to do before you can build or research a particular thing. Missions have a similar sort of thing in the sense that we probably do it in a similar sort of way though. It would mean that missions all have their own YAML file. So let's try that. So let's just call it, let's just call this the kickoff YAML mission, right? So let's call this kickoff. Now the only thing I think missions really need is these prerequisites, right? So prerequisites. And a prerequisite could be all sorts of things. It could be a mission, it could be game state, it could be an achievement, right? So this is quite open. But for the time being, what we want to do is kind of zero in on what does an MVP implementation of that look like without it getting in our way, right? So maybe we have, like, can type be associated maybe with that maybe. Actually, you know what? I don't think we need, we do need mission type here, just because of player generated stuff. It can't just be static in YAML files. But YAML files will represent probably story-based mission types. So that's easy to seed and generate. So we have prerequisites here. And I think this will probably need to be polymorphic at some point, but that's okay. Because what that basically means is we could have an interface which is called missionable, right? Actually, let's take it from this one instead. So get rid of that. Missionable, right? And the idea here is that we want to be able to create this distinction and this clear separation between different types of objects that can represent a mission in some way, or at the very least represent a prerequisite, right? So what would this need to return? Actually, that's really hard to do because let's say we have a prerequisite on a structure being built. This prerequisite, this record needs to exist before it's actually done. So I don't think that actually works. That won't work, unfortunately. We'll come back to that. For now, let's stick to prerequisites just being other missions, right? So at the moment, We can have missions, but we're always going to have prerequisites, except probably the first mission, right? Let's call this welcome, right? This is the welcome mission. This has no prerequisites. Then we would have, let's just rename this, right? Let's just create another mission, for example. And let's just call it stepping out, right? Right, and then, so we've got stepping out. In case you're wondering why I have an ID here, particularly in things like the launchpad, like they're exactly the same. The reason for that is because getting the ID from the file name when reading it and passing it through the hierarchy of dependencies and stuff that are in the system is actually a real pain in the ass to do and quite tricky. So I was just like, you know what? Just aggregate that information across and it's easy. It does mean that sometimes if you make a spelling mistake, it's an error. But as soon as I load all assets for the game, when it boots up, it lets me know straight away. It's like, can't find this. It's like, oh, okay, easy to find. So it's not that big a deal. So stepping out. So we're going to have prerequisites of another mission, right? So this should be quite easy, actually. I think it's just an array, and that is called welcome, right? What have I done wrong here? Oh, space. Yeah, there we go, right? So we can do it like that. That's likely to change probably in the future, as things always do, as I get further down the road. Because, you know, what if I want to have a prerequisite of a structure having been built, right? Let's say that I want a shipyard or a space station, and it has a, you know, needs to be tier 2, right? Tier 2 shipyard, for example. That's going to be quite hard to implement, I think, but we'll figure it out later. But for the time being, you know, I think what the best thing to do is to kind of zero in on the mission system without this sort of stuff just yet, right? So let's keep it with that for now. Okay. So prerequisites at the moment will represent different missions, right? So if we look at this YAML these two YAML files, we would have a tree structure currently with the welcome mission being right at the top, and then we'd have stepping out as immediate dependency of that, right? So what's good about this is when it comes to showing missions to players, this will only be shown, you know, if this has been completed, right? So I think there's a lot more nuance to this in the future. So for example, maybe the prerequisite for this, like you have to have completed that mission, but maybe you don't actually see that mission become available until, you know, you go to a location, and the location is something like 59.45.1, right? So once you've gone to that location, like maybe this is a special in-game planet or something you need to go to, and you're not even told about it. It's just like when you go there, suddenly the mission pops up in your interface, right? It's like, hey, you know, welcome to, you know, Getty Prime, blah, blah, blah. Getty Prime obviously being a Dune reference, right? So this is going to get pretty complicated very quickly, but for the time being, let's keep it simple. Okay. It does mean that I think probably the prerequisites aren't going to be a database record. It's going to be something like an array, actually, now that I mention it, now that I think about it. Like this probably needs to be references to, actually, let's keep this in, actually. Let's step through this and see how we go. Let's assume that one of the prerequisites is you have to go to a location, right? So that means that we have two different types or two different implementations of this. Oh boy, this gets complicated really quickly. But likely what's going to happen here is going to have some sort of strategy implementation. So, because you have a different type. So this will be like a, you know what, maybe it's like this. Maybe we do something like this, mission, welcome. So that's a direct reference to a mission ID. And then this is the location, right? It's a location type. So yeah, that's kind of cool actually. So this would then look something like this. Prerequisite and array prerequisites, which means actually now we have an interface for prerequisite, right? Prerequisite. And we've got, that's it for the time being. I think what we probably need to do here is, has a prerequisite been met, right? Boolean, right? So now if we extrapolate that out further, we can go, we're gonna need another class here. So let's call it a mission prerequisite, right? Prerequisite. Let's get rid of these for the time being, although, and has that dependency been met? Or has it prerequisite been met, right? So we're implementing that. And then what's cool about this then is if we loop through the prerequisites using a strategy pattern, we can then create the appropriate object and then ask the object, has it been met, right? This is probably going to need some parameters here, which I don't know what they are yet, but I want to have flags or like a tracker for the highest level achieved for whatever you want, whether that be shipyard edge research. I mean, this sort of works like in that sort of way. It's just that this keeps this quite open and malleable to whatever requirement we might have, right? We're not tying the implementation and the logical check based on a flag or a tracker. We can do this stuff dynamically and do a query, right? So for example, if the mission prerequisite for this is you have to have completed the mission, the welcome mission, it means that, where was that? I've lost my train of thought. Have a welcome mission. Oh yeah, the mission task, that's right. So we would need to check that the mission task has been checked. So for example, if we do a little bit of pseudocode here, right? So let's just do mission task repository. So, something like mission tasks, which would be a reference to the repository, the mission task repository. Hang on, I want to do this. Mission tasks. I mean, first we've got to do empire, because we need the empire, the player's empire, right? So the empire, and then we need to do also where the mission is the prerequisite, right? The prerequisite mission. In some cases, we might have multiple missions, right? So let's say, for example, we've got 2 mission prerequisites. You've got to have, like, it's dependent on 2 other missions having been completed, right? Rather than sort of a direct ancestry check, because it's actually 2 separate missions. You might want to do something like this, right? So missions prerequisites. And then, so that's basically like, where mission tasks is empire and mission task in blah, blah, blah. And, those mission tasks have been completed, right? Like that. Yeah, that's right. Oh, maybe you can't. Can you not see what I'm typing? You know what? Let me check OBS here, because what's probably happened is it's not showing the thing. This is the annoying with having the showing the whole screen is that I think probably what's happening is I'm typing off screen. Can you see it now? It's probably like this. So I've just moved the code up there. I wish I could see kind of where exactly it's being cropped to. Anyways, if you can't see that, what I can do is get rid of that. I'll go to the code. Yeah. So what I was talking about before is coming back to your question around. Let me just move this up to the top left, because maybe there's a lot of stuff missing there like that. Your question around flags and like a tracker is. You kind of need to know ahead of time what the requirements are for everything. Whereas with this sort of approach using a strategy, I can basically ask at runtime dynamically. It's like, okay, in order for this mission to be available, have they met the prerequisites for this mission? And then if so, it can kind of show that to the end user. So the idea here is that, again, if let's say a mission has a prerequisite of 2 separate missions, we can run this query. So, where the missions are in there, are completed. And then we can also check, like that might only get us 1 record, right? So maybe we do a count like this on it, right? So then you can go, if count greater than or equal to, actually, no, we want to do equals to avoid bugs. Prerequisites, something like that, right? So this will be something like that, right? So for that 1 mission, it'll return true or false based on whether that's been met. And then I think what's cool about this is if we go back to the design here, if we have a location prerequisite, I think this will work quite well actually. we'll have a location prerequisite, right? So location prerequisite, and we'll do met. And a similar thing to that would be return from here. It's like, you know, how would you do that one? You loop through prerequisites. This one needs to know where the player is at that particular point in time. Like what, you know, what are they looking at? Which location? So that's a bit tricky. That needs to have access to things that wouldn't be available yet here. So we need a way of passing very different data payloads to the different prerequisites. So it's probably going to be something like this, you know, mixed. I don't know what we'd call this. Context, maybe? Context for the whatever it is. Oh, what am I doing? Just do it on the interface, Kirk. What are you doing? Right? Mixed context. Something like that, I think. But what that looks like at the moment, I'm not sure. But that does introduce another layer of complexity. So there's probably a missing concept here that needs to be designed and thought through to kind of make that work. But I think this is sort of heading in the right direction. It's like, you know, because again, like we don't want to worry about location prerequisites just now. We just want to make sure that when we design this system and we get missions in place for kind of the next stage, test phase, is we're not setting ourselves up so that we have to rewrite this in the future. I mean, it may still happen. You know, maybe the kind of requirements and the prerequisites get so complicated that it does need a rethink. But at least for the time being, if we can kind of encapsulate some of the foreseen requirements, the known or the unknown knowns, as it were, or sorry, the known unknowns, then at least we kind of set ourselves up, yeah, on the right foot, and then sort of review as we go. Okay, let's get rid of that pseudocode for something. Okay, so what's really interesting about this, I think, is this is where I think we might want to do like a bit of a flow diagram, right? So it's like, let me move that all the way up here. We have this. We'll do a bit of pseudocode here, actually. So how do we trigger when missions are to be shown, right? Because there's a difference between a mission being shown to a player and a mission being accepted by a player. When a mission is accepted, I think we kind of get into a bit easier. We get onto like on a more sure footing. But I just realized the PHP storm just cleared my lines there because I wasn't typing with the autosave. That's funny. You know, when is a mission shown, right? This is where things get a little bit tricky because there's so many factors. You know, there's like, you know, when a player visits a location, when a mission is completed, when a mission is completed and they're at a location, you know, when a particular structure is done, right? Because like maybe this will be like a mission that's associated with, you know, like an in-game guided tutorial, which is, you know, sort of tied to the lore and the narrative. So for example, I can really see us implementing missions that are associated with the space station and colonization, right? Because like they're big points in a player's journey, right? Hopping off world and, you know, establishing their first colony, right? So we have to kind of have these trigger points whereby something has happened, and so therefore we need to kind of show a player a mission. And not only that, that state needs to be valid and present, even when a player maybe logs out, misses it, isn't logged in at the time, right? So like when they come back in, like, you know, showing them the new mission available to them, that could be probably handled through notifications maybe. Might be a good way to do it. But yeah, I mean, this gets really tricky really quickly. Renown. Are you referring to reputation? Sorry, I'm not sure the context there, Carl, sorry. I'll come back to that in a second. So you know, we kind of need to figure out also like, oh, here you go. This is like cool thing about AI, right? It's like when a particular technology is researched, when a particular unit is built, when a particular distributor, yeah. So yeah, all of these kinds of things, right? Like this is all very interesting, and things that we need to think about. So it seems to me that in all of these cases, an event needs to be fired that can then trigger a thing, right? So something is completed, right? That triggers an event, right? And then we have something like a mission event listener, right? Figures out if new missions are available, checks prerequisites, right? And then broadcast event to player, right? Something like that. Yeah, beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Let's just do this. Right? So this is sort of what needs to happen. You need to reach a certain level of reputation with them and mission. Yeah, exactly, right? So if we're talking about sort of factional content, then yeah, absolutely. Renown is certainly one of those things. So I think the cool thing about all of this is that this can be managed internally by the domain. I don't know if there's anything that, I don't know if all of the various domains, such as, the colony core domain and the root, the subdomains around production infrastructure, I don't think they need to be responsible for triggering a particular event. I think what probably needs to happen is, let's say, for example, we have a structure. Let's use the infrastructure one, right? Example. So infrastructure updated is, I think that's, oh no, construction. What's the event? I forgot what the event is called. Construction status notification. Yeah, so we have a construction status notification, right? No, that's not it, actually. I don't think that's what I want. No. So let's go to the construction manager. So this is the interesting thing, right? So you guys are going to see a bit more code here. So yeah, I think we need to probably go into, oh, that gets really tricky. So the time warp engine, I'll give you guys a little bit of context of the time warp engine. So the time warp engine is responsible for managing all of the queues, timing, parallel jobs, all this sort of stuff. And when I say jobs, I'm not talking about Laravel jobs. I'm talking about sort of the player jobs, the tasks that they're sort of executing. That time warp engine manages all of that. And so it also manages the background jobs in Laravel. So, let's say, for example, someone's queued construction of a laboratory. When it gets queued, let's say, for example, something else is already in the queue, it fires this event. And then when it gets queued, the construction manager listens for that event and then does all of this logic, right? So, updates the colony status, notifies the player, all this sort of stuff. Oh, it doesn't actually notify the player specifically. A separate service handles that, but it does all this sort of thing. So where this gets a little bit tricky is there's no specific event that says construction completed. We have the timer completed event, and then we have the construction status notification, which is literally a notification to the player through the WebSockets. And it contains a status for the construction. So this is actually, let me just double check something. Actually, we'll go to the construction manager subscriber. This actually might be what we want. So, we do have it. The game has already grown so much in terms of code that I've forgotten things, right? Like that's how much code is in the game already. So we do have a structure updated broadcast, which is actually a game state event. So there's a separation between notifications and game state. So they could theoretically be the same thing, which it was originally, but I found I had to start bundling in game state, which didn't really have any notification required. Like it's literally just a UI, a client update, and didn't need a notification. So that's why the two have been separated, for those who might be wondering. So we do have this structure updated event, which we could listen to. So what that means is we go structure updated. So that, again, so using the infrastructure example, structure updated, we listen to that as part of the mission system. We could then see, look for missions that are applicable, that are applicable to the player because this was completed, right? And now that I think about that, that's a really bad query. Because it means every single time a structure is updated, we're querying all missions to see if they're legitimate or not. That's not good. That's not going to work. So what it probably means is we might need something like infrastructure data. That gets tricky as well. I'll think it through first so you guys know what I'm thinking. So, in the game data thing in here, we've got the data itself for structures, right? Let's say, for example, there's a mission tied to having the depository completed, right? This would need to happen, right? It means that it has a direct association with making a mission available. The reason why I don't like that is because it sets up a two-way relationship between the mission data and the structured data and any other data I have in the system that has an implication for missions. It would certainly work, and it would mean that, the query for this would literally just be, get mission, check mission legitimacy, right? So it's like, yes, you've done this, right? But maybe there's some other prerequisites for the mission that hasn't been completed yet. So it means that this state needs to be checked in at least two different places. That's probably not so bad because when we check the mission legitimacy, it could do a query for all the prerequisites. So it's actually not that bad an idea. It's just a lot of manual wiring up of data and the relationships. So that's one possible approach, right? The other approach is, going back to this, you look for missions that are applicable to the player because this is completed. Actually, that's not so bad. Because if we do a query, let's do a query, right? So where mission prerequisites contains this. Right? So that would then go to the mission object, and that mission object would then, we have to have a service class that basically checks legitimacy across missions, right? That's actually not too bad, actually. If we go back to our design here, this would be an array, right? The prerequisite array, let me zoom in here a little bit. It might be a little bit too small for you guys, right? If we zoom in on this, we've got a prerequisite array, which references this here, right? And then, so we would find the mission that has a reference to, say, structure. Oh, what was that? What were we looking at? Depository tier 1, right? Just bring that back because it's part of that array. So it would find that mission. So we could do basically a JSON query against the mission table, find that it has a requirement on depository, and also the structure updated event, I think, also includes the tier. So where are we? So the structure updated, yeah, includes the tier of the structure. So we could actually, we would have the data available already. It's like, yeah, that would actually work pretty well, actually. So we can keep it dynamic and fluid, which is really nice. So we would find a mission with this, right? So it's a perfect match. Oh, actually, no, it might be a bit trickier than that because the query needs to be where the depository tier is greater than or equal to 1, right? Oh, actually, maybe it's just equals, actually. Yeah, maybe it's just equivalence check, not a greater than or equal to. Because if it's greater than or equal to it means it'll get that mission record every single time they update the depository. Like if they upgrade the rank, upgrade the tier of the depository structure, then it would query for this every single time up to tier 3. So 3, yeah, we don't want to do that. You would do equals. So that's fine. Cool. Okay, we've only got 40 minutes left, unfortunately. But I hope it kind of gives you some insights as well in regards to just sort of how deeply I'm thinking about these systems and sort of the implications of them. Because even though we're probably not going to be implementing this straight away, it's really important that I think about this and how it's going to impact the system design, right? But I think this will work really well. So let's go back to our pseudocode here. So the structure was updated. We listened to that on sort of a separate listener in the mission domain, core domain. And then we look for a mission that matches a prerequisite for that structure, right? We then load the mission, data and object. We then check all prerequisites for the mission. So the only thing I hate about tab thing is like it won't get out of my way. If they're all good, look, it's even using my language. All good is something I say all the time. Fuck man, LLMs are ridiculous. If they're all good, then we make the mission available to the player. So at this point, I think we want to send a notification to the player, right? That the mission is available. Mission is available. And then what happens then is that the player can click that. The player clicks notification, and then we show the mission screen plus dialogue, and then player accepts or ignores, right? So they can ignore it and come back to it later as part of their notifications. I think that's kind of a nice way to do it. Maybe we have like a special mission log, right? That kind of shows these things, so they're never lost. You can always come back to them. And then if the player accepts, add mission tasks for the mission. I think this will work really well, actually. One fucking keyboard. Yes, sorry. I didn't realize it was that loud. My apologies. I've even got like a directional mic as well. So, but I love this keyboard. It's amazing. I got the Privagen talked about these. I forgot what they're called. I can show you guys, but it's just got the nicest sound. I love it. Oh yeah, that's right. Instead of dots, right? But yeah, no, I think this is going to work really well. So let's go back to our design here, right? So I was actually hoping we'd get into some proper code implementation, but I don't think we're going to have time for it. We'll see how we go. We might be able to get started on some things. So what this means, right, is we need a mission listener. I don't like this name, by the way. Like all the names for these classes are going to change. Like I'm really big on naming and getting it right. Like one of the things I really struggled with is the terms of things like research, structure, technology, because those same terms are used within the game data domain, which is kind of like the raw data around structures and research, that stuff. And actually the sort of runtime requirement of a player having a structure, right? They're literally, although the context is different, they're the exact same thing. One just represents like pure data and dependencies, like basically game data. One represents actually the kind of real-time asset of a player in the game. And so in the end, I just went with the same term. It's like, cause I couldn't think of anything better. The only difference was like research is basically like your study and conduction of research or conducting research. Whereas like that becomes a technology for a player, right? It all results in technology. So there's actually different terms there. The Kansas 360. No. He uses another one you're talking about, the Kinesis one. Yeah, no, not that. He's got this other one now. I forgot what it's called now. Maybe it's on the back here. But it is such a nice keyboard. The Flow 84 key, dual mode, low profile, mechanical keyboard. But one thing I really like this keyboard as well, as with all the keyboards I purchase, is it has to be able to switch very easily between my Mac and my Windows box. My Windows box is basically just gaming and hobby stuff, whereas the Mac is work and code and programming. So if a keyboard can't do that nicely and well, it's not on my radar. Okay, I'm pretty sure it was Primagen. Maybe it was someone else. But I was pretty sure I was inspired by him to get this one. I've got a bunch of keyboards. I've got like probably 10. Some of them are like stuff like the Kinesis. I've got the, not the Kinesis one. I've got like the, what is it? The Diagma? What's it called? I forgot what it's called. Like the Digma Defy. Beautiful keyboard. It's such a good keyboard. However, having to switch between a laptop keyboard and a custom keyboard like that is a nightmare. So I had to forego that one. I'll probably end up selling it actually. It's a brand new keyboard. I got used to it. I got really good at using it. And then as soon as I switched to using the Mac keyboard again, like on the laptop, I was like, oh man, this isn't going to work, unfortunately. Anyways, so we have a mission listener, right? So I think the best way to do this is to have the listener listen for specific events. So we'd have a structure updated event, right? We'd have a mission completed event, right? We'd have location visited event, right? So all of these things. And what's really cool about this is I think that all of these could basically go to a private handle method, pass the event, and then because there's two things there, right? It's it needs to find the mission that matches the requirements for the mission prerequisites, and then that mission does its that mission object. Well, not here, probably in the mission manager actually, does a check to see if all the prerequisites have been met. So we'll do something here. So prerequisites met for mission, right? That'll be a Boolean return, right? So the mission listener will be working directly with the mission manager, and it goes, hey, I've got a new event. The prerequisites, I found the mission that matches this. Can you take care of that for me, right? I think what we're probably going to need to do is something a bit. Oh, hang on. Yeah, because when a structure is updated, for example, right? Look for missions that matches a prerequisite for that structure. So the prerequisite for every single type of event will be very different. So a structure updated event will have a structure updated or a structure prerequisite, right? Right? So this mission listener will create a new structure prerequisite because of that event. It'll pass it the context, and that context will probably be things like the structure ID and the tier, maybe even the location, like, where's that colony found, for example. The structure prerequisite will then do its query. Actually, maybe I don't need the mission manager for this. Ooh, there's a missing concept here. So this is different. This is actually internal to here. And then the mission manager will fetch out the prerequisites and then do the relevant queries based on the prerequisite. Oh, okay. So each of these prerequisites have their own dependency. So this would have a dependency on the structure repository, right? Because it needs to figure out the context is met. So what's interesting about this, right, is that in the case of a structure being updated, even though at this point, we kind of already know that the prerequisite has been met, we need a separate system to manage that because the mission manager needs to check all prerequisites, not just the one that's come through. So we don't want to do like a sort of a pseudo check here, right? And then sort of pass to the mission manager and do its separate checks, and then sort of have some sort of intelligence regarding what checks have been done, which haven't. We just want to go, yep, structure's been updated. We find, this is where it gets tricky. So we need to find a mission based on that structure. So this finds the mission based on that context, right? So we find a mission based on the structure updated. If there's a valid one there, we then pass that mission to the mission manager, and then the mission manager then checks all prerequisites. And then it'll even do a separate query, right? It'll do the query for the structure that we've just completed, but that's okay. Right? That's a separate thing. And this will all happen in the background. So when the structure is updated, the player will be notified a split second later, half a second or a second later. It's done all these queries and checks, and then it'll notify the player that actually, yep, there's an available mission for you here. You click the notification, it shows up a really cool, nice mission dialogue, and then the player can accept. So I think that's really cool. I think like we're getting really close to kind of like a jumping off point for coding, which is really cool. And this is already actually more complicated than I thought it might be. Always seem to underestimate complexity. So They're coded by you, so you can customize them exactly the way you want them. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and that's why I love those keyboards. So one thing about the one I've got now is you can't do that. Like it doesn't have the ability to kind of switch layers or anything like that, which I think is a really cool feature of those keyboards. So if I could find something like this, there's, what's it called, the low tech, whatever it's called, keyboard with layer support, I mean, I think I'd be in heaven. I think it'd be the perfect keyboard. Okay, cool. So that's that. Let's go through our notes now. Can you guys see my notes here as well? You probably can, actually. I don't want you to see my notes just because there's like work-related stuff there and other things there which don't, I mean, not that you can really see anything, but just to be on the safe side. So what I might do is I'll switch back to the, is it the game? Yeah, switch back to the game for a second, just so I switch it back to notes here. So, I can't see your keyword. Oh, you want to see it? I'll just unplug for a second. Is that one? It's really nice. It doesn't have like the keypad or anything. You can get the larger keyboard, which has the things as well. The keypad for numbers if you do a lot of number-based work, which you could probably argue that some programmers do, but it's not that much. Not that much to slow me down anyway. But see, that'd be really cool, right? Like if this keyboard had like a layer where I could like build a keypad into it, that would be it'd be perfect. Okay, so just going through my notes here to see. Yeah, so we talked here about like branching narratives and missions based on dialogue. So I think one of the things we haven't covered here. So I'll go back to development here for a second. Hope you guys can see that. We haven't really talked or thought about branching missions. And branching missions essentially means that, if you select option A, it results in one mission or one path. You select option B as part of the dialogue, you go another direction. So we actually have, we need something here for handling dialogue, right? Now I suspect maybe it's like dialogue options, right? I suspect the early missions, particularly sort of like the tutorial missions that you'll step through as part of the game, probably won't have dialogue options. It'll be all just kind of like, just one thing that you do, I need to complete. But dialogue options are really good for narrative, right? It makes it much more complicated because you have to track all this stuff really well. So that's going to be a lot more difficult, but I think, like, okay, so this is pretty cool. So we can probably, this is the stuff that gets me really excited and really juicy about software design. The design that we've just the design that we've just landed on for managing things like all of this sort of stuff, all of these things can be completed to trigger missions. We could actually use the exact same system for dialogue option selections, right? So we could have something like a dialogue prerequisite, right? Oh man, this is so cool. So you have a dialogue prerequisite, right? So that we have a mission where a prerequisite here is dialogue, right? So maybe the dialogue option is, let's just say 0. Let's just assume it's an array structure of 2 options, right? So 0 or 1. So they have to have selected dialogue option 0 or dialogue option 0. Well, what's a better name for that? Or whatever. Dialogue option for the time being, right? So the dialogue prerequisite for a particular mission has to be dialogue option 0. So in the mission task, we probably need, you would create a mission task, I think, when they accept the mission that maybe not, maybe it's a different way. Maybe the mission, you select the dialogue option, that's a different thing altogether than a mission task. Because you could probably have multiple chaining dialogue options. Like let's say, for example, you've got a conversation with an NPC, right? And you have like several pieces of dialogue, right? So that probably needs to be encountered. Like I haven't encapsulated this here at all, like multiple dialogue screens, multiple dialogue options. But maybe you've got branching paths within the same mission for the dialogue options. Like maybe you've got like 9 different options in total. You've got like 2 options in the first one. You've got another 2 in the second one. All right, let's say 8, sorry. So you've got 2 options of 4 dialogues. Sorry, a dialogue option of 2 and a dialogue option of 4, right? Or something like that. So that needs to be handled, which means that when you select a dialog option, yeah, we've got to track that somehow. That's going to be, this probably needs to change a little bit, the mission task. So, All right, we might come back to that one for today. We won't to go through that today. We'll definitely have to think through it and figure it out. All right, you guys have to give me just 5 minutes. I'm busting to go to the loo. So what I'll do is I'll just switch back to the splash screen. You guys will just give me 5 minutes, and I'll be back shortly. All right. All right, I'm back. Sorry about that. I was literally dying, just busting something chronic. Okay, so let's get back to it. So one thing we haven't talked too much about right now is, the whole context for all this, or why we started this, is missions and things that players create themselves, right? So one of those missions, or types of missions, are things like being able to send out drones and things to scan planets, creating a colonization mission to go and colonize a planet. And so I'm trying to think whether that's really needed, in all honesty. Like, what I'm trying to get at here is we need a way of sort of tracking what your fleets are up to, what you're sending, where you're sending your drones, all these sorts of things, right? Now, in honesty, after kind of going through this with you guys, with you all, is do we use the mission system for that, or is it a separate system? I'm not sure yet, but let's go back to the game for the time being. I'll have a look here. So hopefully you guys can see that again. I haven't stuffed anything up. Oh man, my throat's getting sore. We're wrapping up here pretty soon anyway. Again, unfortunately, I don't think we can get too much code, but that's okay. So the idea is, once you have, when you go to the system screen, it's obviously not available at the moment, but when you go to the system screen and you navigate through the various systems, when you observe them, these potential colonization targets become available, right? So at some point, you're going to find a planet or some other celestial body that you want to colonize, and you need to send the Genesis, right? Is what it's currently called, the Genesis colonization craft, and send that across to that particular location, right? Now, my original thinking was that we need missions for this, but from a slightly different perspective, which is these are short-lived missions that are just for that one thing, so that let's say, for example, I sort of click the planet that I want to colonize, and one of the options available to me would be to go and colonize that planet, right? So, and you make sure that you've got the So excuse me. You select the craft that you want to send there, or some, I don't know. I haven't gotten that far yet, but figuring out some way of being able to send ships there. But that's obviously not the only sort of mission type that you have. You've also got engagement missions, right? Where you need to, and maybe mission is actually the wrong term here. Maybe there's a different term that we should be talking about. But sending one of your fleets off to engage with an enemy player or a target player. Sorry, they're not necessarily enemies. Maybe they're just, there's the grey line there, right? Sending drones to scan planets and asteroids and all that sort of stuff. These things all need to be handled, and so that needs a way of tracking that sort of stuff. And so my original thinking actually was that we tie that into the mission system, so that you essentially create a new mission and a mission type. So it's obviously a player-based mission type, and then you've got an objective associated with that mission. So not mission tasks, but an objective, and that objective is colonize planet, attack player, defend player, transfer. Like a cargo mission, these sorts of things, trade missions, all these sorts of things. And so I think if I go back to development now and we go back to the mission thing, I think for the most part we can use that for this, right? So the galaxy type, the mission type would be the player mission type. There's one thing missing here though, which would be the objective. But perhaps that's a task. Maybe we create a task. Actually, maybe that's a better term. Objectives. The objectives of the mission, the objectives of that's much better. I like it. Okay. So you have these objectives. So if you're sending, a Genesis craft to colonize a planet, maybe it creates a mission which doesn't have any prerequisites because it's player created. No, this isn't going to work. You know why? Because the mission system at the moment is tied to translations. Oh, but actually, that might be okay, actually. Because maybe if it's like a player-generated mission, you've got... The name would be like, colonize, attack, defend, trade, cargo. These sorts of things. And then description could actually be a special description string for each of those types, which gets shown. And so then depending on the mission type, the mission objective, sorry, let's keep designing on this actually, and just you've got different types of objectives, right? So objective could be attack, defend, trade, cargo, colonize. Although cargo is not the right thing, not the right term I want there. Anyway. Right, so and then depending on the type of objective, could change the description. So instead of being pulled from a specific mission, now you know what I don't like this actually, because players are going to be creating these missions all the time, and it'll slow down this table. Like I could easily see hundreds of thousands of missions just because of all the stuff that players are doing in the game, and that slows down things like. Look for the missions for prerequisites for story and sort of guide-based missions, right? So I actually, now thinking about it, I don't think we want to do this. But what we really need to do is still encapsulate that system so that, we're not having to all of these things are very similar in the sense that attack, defend, trade, colonize, they all have a set amount of time for them to complete. Let's say, for example, you're sending a fleet off to the far-flung reaches of the galaxy. It's going to take an amount of time to get there. Then there's the amount of time necessary for the engagement to kind of play out and report to you sort of the outcomes. Same with defending. Same with trading, although trading is probably a little bit different because there's two players involved there. So sort of like a shared mission. So we want to kind of encapsulate all that stuff. And the mission system feels almost like it should be used there, but also not quite, because we don't have prerequisites. That doesn't apply. The name and description are going to be the same no matter what it is, right? Because an attack objective is going to have the exact same name and description as it'll always have that one. There's no dialogue options, so now it seems to feel like maybe sort of putting this here with missions is just lumping it in together and maybe creating things, make things more difficult. Anybody have any suggestions on the kind of like what we could call these sort of activities that players are doing? Like they are missions, but by the same time, they're like a very, very different context, right? Very different mission context. I'm not sure. We're still live, right? Are we still live? Yeah, we're still live. It's funny because the context of this entire discussion in DevStream was really about this. Creating objectives for players to kind of go and colonize planets. And we did all this stuff, which is awesome, right? This is awesome. Like this, I now in my mind have a really good idea in regards to how this should be implemented. And to me, it works. It's going to work really nicely. Maybe with a few changes, but it's malleable, it's extensible. Yeah, it's going to work really nicely. Tasks. Yeah, maybe actually, because this will be renamed, right? Because we're calling this objectives now. Yeah, I don't know. Because, like, I mean, they're also, apart from attack and defend, they're all very different, right? So attack and defend is both basically go to a location and either attack the player that you find there or the fleet that you find or fleets that you find there, or defend. You know, you're defending against, I mean, it's still an attack basically, but you're going to a colony to defend a colony or something, and so everyone else who is there, who's defending, you're not attacking, essentially, if that makes sense, right? You're only attacking the attackers, if that makes sense, right? Whereas attack is like you're attacking anybody that's at that location. Trade is very different because trade actually requires a trade agreement. So you require a trade agreement to be established with a separate player. Once you've established that trade agreement, you then both need to send cargo craft or transport craft. I don't know what the right term for that is either. In the respective directions to send the resources that you've agreed upon. And if you don't do that, you're basically penalized because you've agreed to it, right? So you'll be given an amount of time to kind of see that through, depending on the galaxy speed. But you need to do that. Cargo, actually, maybe this is just a transport objective. Like you're transporting resources between your colonies, essentially, right? And they're active all the time. So once you establish them, they stay active until such time as you stop that transportation. And then colonize, obviously, is you're going to a location, you're colonizing. So these are all actually very different things in the way they behave. So maybe they need to be treated differently. Maybe I kind of need to just, do some pseudocode as well with that one and figure out what needs to be done there. Because I could conceivably just focus on colonization and, what's the other one? Scan. Right, so this is for things like your drones where you're scanning planets and asteroids and stuff for resources. Although probably need a better name for that as well. But we could probably just start with these two and just kind of see what comes out of it code-wise. And then if there's some similarities there and sort of something starts to emerge from the design and the code, then we start to encapsulate that as part of its own system, I think. But yeah, it feels to me now like the intention behind this design was to support this, but now I'm realizing actually this is its own beast. And needs to stay its own beast. Otherwise, I think lumping these two in together is going to cause some real problems in the future. It'll make things it'll make it awkward to work with and less extensible by nature. Okay, so it's now 10 to 1, so the 3 hours is almost up. So what we might do is just field question stuff. Anything you guys want to see, talk about, we can talk about that sort of stuff. I'll probably start wrapping it up, I think. Because one, my throat's really starting to hurt, and also two, I'm getting pretty hungry. Okay, let's go back to the game for the time being and see what we've got. I've been working through a lot of the content as well for a lot of these things, so you guys will be able to get a good read of this sort of stuff if you haven't read it already in due time. The goal with the lore and the feeling and the flavor of the game is for it to be serious, but also kind of like not taking itself too seriously, if that makes sense. So it's weighted more towards a serious tone, but with this kind of like element of not like clowning around or clownism, but certainly a slightly sort of jokey, sort of silly take on some of these things. But yeah, so that is that. I can probably showcase some infrastructure stuff if you guys want, if you haven't seen it before. So this screen's definitely going to be getting an update pretty soon. Like I said, research and production have both had, like research in particular, just had a huge update. Production is now sort of based on the aesthetics and theme of the research screen. One, because I really liked it. I think it worked really well. But also it's just like you'll notice here, like this has a slightly different background, transparent image as opposed to research, and infrastructure will have a different one again as well. But yeah, I think it's working pretty nicely, working pretty well. But yeah, so infrastructure will be getting a redesign. Not completely, but enough that you'll notice it during the next text phase and potentially the next devlog as well. But you can see here, I basically got a colony that is pretty well established now. So I'm at a point for testing purposes, obviously, where I can create spacecraft. Which, like I said, it's almost finished. Like this system is so close to being done. The next part to this after production is basically fleet management. So essentially just like moving your spacecraft around into different fleets. Yeah, which will make up your full armada of spacecraft. Yeah, so back to infrastructure. So is it open source? No, definitely not. This is a business first and foremost, and a dream project of mine, basically since the early 2000s. I've got game design documents going back to, I think, like 2003 or something for online RTS-based games. I've always loved them. I've talked a bit about games like Starsphere, which is like really started my passion in these sorts of games. And they're such a niche subgenre. They're niche. They're usually made by developer hobbyists like myself, with a real passion for sort of learning and just kind of developing a game. But no, this is definitely not going to be open source. But one thing I would really like to be able to do in the future is have this moddable in some ways. That's probably going to be a bit tricky considering this is a it's a live service game that's run on the web. But also, this, I'm not sure if you've seen, Carl, but I've also got an installable desktop client that I'm working on. It's functional, it works, but I'm learning a lot of stuff from that. In the browser, when you have errors and issues, it recovers pretty well. When it's part of its own separate client, it does not recover well at all. So I've got to develop some wrappers and abstractions to kind of handle that stuff a bit better. Lua extensions. Yeah, I've heard about Lua, right? Like, doesn't World of Warcraft use Lua or something for its UI and plugins, add-on system? I think that could be quite cool. Yeah, for sure. But yeah, I mean, that would be obviously only be available for things like the installable client, not the browser. What was I talking about? Oh, that's right, production stuff. Yeah, so you can see here with my, I really want to play with this. With Lua, you mean? And start implementing that. I think it'd be fun to work with for sure. But yeah, like what that looks like and whether we actually do it or not is a very different ball game, right? So like this is essentially a browser first game, but the idea long term is to have an installable client because, and the main reason is because I can turn it into a real game then. That's not to say that this isn't going to be a real game in the browser, but there are certainly some pretty harsh limitations of things I can and can't do. So, like I really want in the future for this to be a properly 3D model. And so I've been learning how to do 3D and, shaders and all that sort of stuff. And I have posted some stuff in the past on the Discord, like my test runs, and it looks awesome. Like, some of the planned stuff I created look like really, I mean, I want to say awesome because you guys will be the judge of that for sure, but I thought they looked good. And so I basically want to be able to have proper 3D models in the game, and I want to be able to have audio, sound effects, all sorts of things. And you can obviously do that on the web, but downloading gigabytes worth of 3D models and textures for a browser, not particularly good. But if you've got an installable client, you install a couple of gigs for that, then it makes it a lot, it's an easier sell then, right? So, and that would be true not just of the desktop client, but also of mobile-based clients as well. And so the game needs to support both 3D rendering as well as 2D images. So, if you're on your mobile and you're on a bad connection, you're in the browser, obviously we want to show the 2D images and things, not 3D models. 3D models will only be available for things like for the client, the installable clients, which is pretty exciting. Like I've already tested it on iOS, on the Mac for installable client, and on Windows. Seems to work pretty well. So that's what Eve has. Oh, what do you mean? That's interesting. I played Eve in the past. I wasn't aware. Anyways, yeah, so yeah, like having properly 3D models and, a proper 3D background that you can kind of like navigate through, having a galaxy that you can browse using at least not necessarily 3D models, but like a 3D space so that you can go to proper coordinates and navigate around. Even that we could support on mobile, so I think that's a big deal. But yeah, so back to infrastructure. We're going to wrap up here in a minute. You can see here I've got my space station. I've got my hangar, which is where all the ships go once they're finished, and the shipyard as well. And then, yeah, so still lots of things to do. Actually, one thing I will show you guys is there's a lot of really cool stuff that we can do. So let me see if I can... I can't research that one. Find something I can research. What am I missing here? Laboratory tier 2. Let's do that. Let's get some things building and going. So I'll go back to the colony. Let's upgrade the laboratory. That's going to take 47 seconds. That's perfect, actually. Oh, actually, let me make sure that I've got... Uh-oh, I think I just saw an error there. Let's open up this. I've broken something. Yeah, damn. Maybe I might be able to showcase it. That sucks. Let me just refresh the page here and let's see how we go. Oh, I know I've broken stuff. It's all the pseudocode things I was doing. Okay, what have I done here? Let me just check the logs here. Because I should be able to show you. I think I've just done something basic because of all the pseudocode everywhere. Let's do this again, actually. Okay, Laravel. What's the error? Near depository tier equals 1. Where is that? Oh, on the YAML parser. Oh, for some reason it's pulling up the mission files. Oh, I shouldn't be doing that. Crap. Okay. Let me commit what I've got here anyway. On the back end. Sorry, I'm just, if you want to say, I can switch to development here. Yeah, so basically all this stuff, because the game automatically loads YAML files from within those directories. This is obviously incorrect YAML, so it's breaking. So let's add this. Sudo code and exploration for missions. Okay, and then we're just going to check out our previous branch, and then we'll get our queue running again. Now it should run fine. There we go, we're back. Okay, cool. EVE Online allows you to download the textures in advance, or you can download them when you need them. Oh, neat. Okay, yeah, that's pretty nifty. So at the moment, everything in the game is just-in-time loading. So for example, if I, what I'll do is I will disable the cache and I'll throttle my speed here, and you'll see what's going on. So if I refresh, it'll show a loader and all sorts of stuff. Even fast 4G is, wait, hang on, oh, wait, did that error out? Oh no, it's still going. Yeah, fast 4G is very slow. And if I go to, let's try reset screen maybe. If I do this. Oh, hang on a sec, what's going on there? I don't think it's, that, oh, maybe it's too fast. We'll try slow 4G. So if I go to infrastructure page, and if I open this up, okay, what's going on? It's going really quick. It's not throttling for some reason. Let's close that for a second. I'm going to close that as well. Oh yeah, I think I had 2. Let's try this again. Oh no, that's weird. It's not, let's try again. Refresh. Maybe I need to just do slow 4G. What's going on there? Something really weird's going on. Oh no, it's still downloading on slow 4G. That gives you an idea. That's it. So you saw the loader stuff there. So let me see if I can show it here in production. Yeah, so you might have just seen it. What I might do actually is I'll go slow 4G. Oh, no wonder. I didn't have the cache thing yet. Okay, so I click here. So you see the little loader screen stuff that shows up there. If I go to, let's try going over here. The best way to do it actually will be to go back to the Galaxy screen and show you. So let's go fast 4G, disable cache. We'll go back to the Galaxy screen and refresh. Now it should be pretty slow because the images and stuff in the background are actually quite big, right? So if then I've got continue. Was it that slow? It's taking that long? Yes. There you go. Yeah, it downloads everything as we go. So, with an installable client, it means that, that content is basically available there for you already. And it wouldn't be a big download, honestly. Like, if it's mostly just images and a few 3D models, I mean, it's not going to be something like a huge game. Like, maybe a gig, with all the different planets and asteroids and their models and shaders and textures and stuff. But yeah. All right. Turn off throttling again. So that's that. Yeah, so anyway, one thing I wanted to show you was this, right? So let's try this again. So we'll hopefully this works. Let me make sure that the cues are running. And reverb, let's just rerun reverb as well, just be on the safe side. So we'll upgrade that, right? Because I want to show you something. So you can see up the top here now, we can see stuff in the queue, in the infrastructure. So once that starts, oh no, there is an error. Damn it. I'll have to showcase it another time. Let's see. Yeah, there's something going on there. I don't know what happened there actually. Console error? Oh, issue with the WebSocket maybe. May have to need to refresh. Let's try again. Oh, there you go. Okay, so you can see up at the infrastructure. I think I had an issue with restarting reverb, that's all. So that's going there now. So you can see the progress in infrastructure, and then I can queue up stuff here. So say for the solar farm. So now you can see the queue item there and that. And the same thing happens for research as well. So if I go to research, see if I can find one that I can do. You see that was really quick because only a few seconds because it was testing. So I could do radiation shielding, takes 4 minutes. It's queued, and then it does begin. So everything gets queued initially, and then it starts once it's the time warp engine figures out whether or not you've got basically space for it. We'll try and do. I've got no queue capacity. I don't have any queue capacity. Oh, whatever. I can show that another time. Yeah. But yeah, so same with production. So when I've got production finished, like when you're producing spacecraft and stuff, it'll show it there. It'll show you all of, how many things you've got in the queue, and that's across all of your shipyards, not just one, right? So if you've got 30 things in queue, it'll show you. Yep, you've got 30 stuff there that needs to go through. And you also on this screen, you'll see your shipyards. How much stuff is in queue there. It's like, this is going to be a really detail-oriented screen. There'll be a lot going on there. So, all right. So, no, definitely not native PHP. I won't touch that. I think, I just don't. I don't know. Maybe I just need to play with it a bit more to kind of understand its value. But I can't see myself using it honestly, just because this is essentially like a SPA with a Laravel API backend. There's no need to use native PHP there. And also, two, I just don't like the idea of using something like native HTTP to drive an interface. I just don't think it's the right fit, wrong tool for the job. You may as well just use a JavaScript alternative, which there are plenty of those out now these days. All right, so that's been 3 hours, holy moly. So thank you all for joining in. This has actually been really pleasurable and a lot of fun to do. So I do apologize for those that wanted to see some code that we didn't get to that point. So next one, hopefully maybe I come next time with a design ready to go and then implement the additional, or kind of zero in on a particular feature and sort of implementing that. And we can go from there. So again, Thank you all so much for coming. Really appreciate it. This has definitely been my longest stream ever, and also the first proper development stream I've ever done as well. So if you like it, if you enjoy it, please like and subscribe on the channel. I'll definitely be doing more of these. Like I said, it was a lot of fun, and it allows me to kind of think out loud and talk through the game, and something I love doing. So thank you very much. I am definitely going to get going now. I'm starving and a little bit tired, so I'll talk to you all very soon.